Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a devoted 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, shared custody with her ex-husband Keith despite their separation. They maintained a friendly relationship for their children's sake. Crystal lived 45 miles southeast of Louisville with her current boyfriend, Brooks Holt, and their 2-year-old son. As a responsible and reliable parent, Crystal always responded to her mother Shelby Ballard's calls. However, when Shelby couldn't reach Crystal on July 5, 2015, she grew concerned. It was unusual for Crystal to ignore her mother's calls, and Shelby's worry intensified with each passing hour. After 24 hours of silence, Shelby's maternal instincts told her something was wrong. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were met with silence. Shelby then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone could provide information about her daughter's whereabouts. Crystal's family had not seen or heard from her in a while, which was unusual. Her sister Brooke tried to reach her but couldn't, and her boyfriend Brooks said he hadn't seen her since Friday night when she was playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone, and he thought she might have gone to visit her cousin for the 4th of July. However, Crystal's mother Shelby was worried and tried to contact her, but couldn't. She reported Crystal missing to the police, and just then, her son Casey got a call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This made Casey and his father Tommy very concerned, as they knew Crystal would never leave her car behind. When they arrived at the location, they found Crystal's car with a flat tire, which only added to their fear that something was seriously wrong. If Crystal had car trouble, she would have contacted someone for help, not tried to fix it herself. The fact that her keys, phone, and purse was still in the car on the passenger seat was suspicious. Crystal never went anywhere without these belongings, so their presence added to the concern about her safety. After finding her car on the Bluegrass Parkway, Crystal's father and brother notified the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Investigators searched the car but found no signs of a struggle. However, they did notice something unusual. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than Crystal. This raised suspicions that someone else might have been driving her car. The authorities asked for witnesses to come forward, but no one provided any useful information to aid the investigation. The police decided to seek the public's help through the media, releasing Crystal's photo and asking for anyone with information to come forward. Despite their efforts, no significant leads were discovered. Crystal's father, Tommy, took matters into his own hands, organizing search parties to find his daughter. However, the challenging hot and humid weather conditions hindered their searches. Many people helped search for Crystal, but one person who was noticeably absent was her boyfriend, Brooks Holt. The police grew suspicious of Brooks because he seemed unconcerned about Crystal's disappearance, especially since she was the mother of his child. When questioned, Brooks claimed that Crystal and their son had gone with him to his family's farm the night before. Brooks said they returned home around midnight, and he went to bed. He stated that Crystal stayed up late playing games on her phone, as she often did. Brooks claimed that when he woke up at 7 a.m., his son was in bed with him, but Crystal was missing. At first, he thought maybe she had gone out with her cousin. However, those close to Crystal disagreed with Brooks' story. They knew Crystal would never leave her 2-year-old son behind, as they were extremely close. In fact, Crystal's sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave Brooks because he had been dishonest with her and showed little emotional attachment. Crystal had told her mother, Cher, that she wanted to end her relationship with Brooks, but she was afraid to do so because he was controlling. Crystal's brother, Casey, had also noticed the tension between them and had seen them arguing several times. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and gave him a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. After the test, Brooks had a formal interview with the detectives. They had gathered evidence that supported his alibi, including a video that showed his truck entering his family's farm and leaving around midnight. However, because the truck had tinted windows, they couldn't determine who was in the vehicle at the time. Brooks explained that while he was at the farm, he did some chores, set a fire to dispose of building materials, and waited for the fire to die out before driving back home. During the interview, the police asked him about a brief 13-second phone call he made to a business associate, Steve Lawson, on his way back from the farm. To clear up any confusion, Brooks asked Steve Lawson to explain their conversation to the police during the interview and called him. However, the police was skeptical when Steve Lawson claimed he had called Brooks to ask for the phone number of a rental property, as it sounded like a rehearsed alibi. According to Steve Lawson, Brooks told him he needed to wait until he got home to get the number from Crystal, who handled such matters. The police were puzzled by this, questioning why Brooks couldn't simply hand the phone to Crystal, who was with him at the time, and resolve the issue right then. They wondered why Brooks had to wait to talk to her in person. During the interview, Brooks received a call from his brother Nick, a police officer at the Bardstown Police Department, who advised Brooks to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police were skeptical that Crystal had voluntarily abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. They suspected that something had happened to her while she was at the Brooks HW family farm. As the investigation into her disappearance progressed, several people came forward claiming to have seen Brooks's truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Howell family farm. Detectives became increasingly convinced that the brothers were at the farm, attempting to destroy evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To obtain more information, the police decided to bring Nick, Brooks's brother, in for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts that placed him at his family's farm on July 8th, and asked him to provide an explanation for his presence there. Nick claimed to have no idea what the police were referring to, and said he wasn't out that night. But the police didn't believe him. They directly asked Nick if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick firmly denied any wrongdoing and swore that his brother was incapable of harming anyone. The police officer, Nick, was adamant that he would never assist in covering up a crime, including helping Brooks. After the interview, Nick agreed to take a polygraph test, but he failed 2 questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph, Nick insisted he was telling the truth. On October 15th, the police investigation identified Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Holt, as the prime suspect in her disappearance. The same day, Nick, Brooks' brother, was fired from the Bardstown Police Department for hindering the investigation. Although the police were confident they knew who was responsible for Crystal's disappearance and death, they lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest. They were hesitant to take their suspect to court without solid evidence, fearing an acquittal would prevent them from retrying the case due to double jeopardy. In Kentucky, the FBI and local law enforcement joined Crystal's friends, family, and volunteers in an extensive search effort at the 240-acre Ha family farm. Despite daily searches, Crystal's loved ones were left frightened and desperate for any news. The searchers hoped to find Crystal safe and sound, but they also needed answers. At the farm, investigators thoroughly examined the remains of a fire, but they didn't find any human remains. They did discover pieces of clothing in the ashes, but they couldn't link them to Crystal's disappearance. The police issued multiple search warrants for the farm, targeting vehicles and homes. However, these searches didn't produce any significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about her disappearance, but no one came forward with any information. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's dad, was driven to find his daughter. Her disappearance hit him hard, especially since he'd already gone through a similar tragedy. In 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot her, beat her, and then burned and scattered her remains on a farm. Though it took years, the perpetrators were eventually caught, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Despite this painful past, Tommy refused to give up on finding Crystal. He pursued every lead, no matter how small, and explored every avenue. He talked to neighbors, interviewed potential witnesses, and contacted anyone who might have information. To aid his search, Tommy spent his own savings on hiring experts, including cadaver dogs and a private investigator. Tommy Ballard was determined to solve the mystery, so he kept detailed records of every tip he followed and clue he found. He regularly met with the police to share his discoveries and get their input. On an early November morning in 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherry, watched as they left, feeling a sense of unease. She quickly said a prayer, asking God to watch over them in the woods. Sherry then returned to bed, trying to relax. However, just minutes later, the phone rang, shattering her peace. When she answered, she heard her panicked grandson on the other end. "Papa has been shot," he cried, his voice trembling with fear. Sherry's heart sank, and she was overcome with panic. She rushed to the bathroom, grabbing clothes as she went, while her grandson continued to cry on the phone. Sherry quickly reassured her husband, telling him she was calling 911 as she rapidly got dressed. Her mind was flooded with worries about his condition. When she arrived at the scene, she was met with an overwhelming sense of grief. She rushed to Tommy's side, shaking him vigorously, but her distress turned to horror as she saw blood gushing from his nose. When officers and witnesses arrived, they quickly pulled Sherry away from Tommy so that medical personnel could tend to him. However, Sherry knew her husband was already dead. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene, having been shot once in the chest. Initially, the police suggested that Tommy's death was a hunting accident, which outraged Sherry. She was adamant that this was not an accident, but rather a deliberate murder. As the investigation unfolded, authorities ruled out the possibility that Tommy took his own life, finding that his weapon had not been fired. They also cleared Tommy's 11-year-old grandson of any involvement in the shooting. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police announced that they were treating Tommy's death as a murder investigation. The Ballard family believes that Tommy's murder was connected to his investigation into his daughter Crystal's disappearance. They think those responsible for harming Crystal wanted Tommy silenced, fearing he might uncover the truth. In 2022, the FBI led a 5-day investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance, returning to the Haar family farm to gather more evidence. Their goal was to collect enough evidence to hold the responsible individual accountable. Although the FBI didn't disclose what they found, a spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that all evidence collected would be analyzed at the FBI's lab in Quantico as the investigation continued. The Kentucky Attorney General made a key decision, appointing a special prosecutor to help with the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, was informed of the appointment and strongly supported it, believing it was necessary to ensure justice for her loved ones. In July 2023, a Kentucky grand jury indicted 32-year-old Joseph Lawson on 2 counts: conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence, both related to Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The judge set his bond at $10 million and ordered him to avoid contact with Crystal's family. The people of Bardstown felt a mix of emotions when Brooks Houck was arrested for Crystal's murder. While the news was heartbreaking, bringing home the reality that Crystal was not just missing, but had been killed, many felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice would be served. The arrest brought a sense of closure and relief to those affected by Crystal's tragic death. Brooks Houck appeared in court virtually 1 month after his October 2023 arrest. This crucial hearing brought new revelations about another unsolved Bardstown murder. The judge asked prosecutor Shane Young if his team was investigating any other cases connected to Crystal's case. The prosecutor was investigating 2 connected murders: Crystal's murder and the murder of her father, Tommy Ballard. They believed they had the gun used to kill Tommy, which they claimed to have purchased from Nick Houck, who allegedly used a fake name during the sale. Brooks Houck's attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be disqualified from the case, citing bias and unfair treatment since 2017. They also argued that the $10 million bail was excessive. However, the Kentucky Appeals Court ruled against Houck, upholding the $10 million bond and denying his request to replace the judge. In a separate development, Stephen Lawson was indicted in December 2023 on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Notably, Stephen Lawson's son, Joseph Lawson, had been arrested in connection with Crystal's disappearance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Papenheim. Sarah Papenheim was born on January 30, 1997, in Minnesota to Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Papenheim. She was their second child, with an older brother named Josh, with whom she shared a close bond that grew stronger as they grew older. In the 2nd grade, Sarah's family moved from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was not only a diligent student, but also an enthusiastic member of the school band, playing the drums. Sarah had a deep passion for music, particularly foreign music and drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly participated in weekly jam sessions at various Redding venues. Her drumming skills stood out, and she was a rare female presence on stage. At 18, Sarah returned to her native Minnesota with her mother and brother, following her parents' divorce. She continued to play drums at various Minnesota venues, which eventually led her to meet renowned blues guitarist and singer Bernard Allison. He was impressed by her performance, and Sarah began to occasionally perform at his concerts. By 19, Sarah had become a local blues sensation, earning the nickname Ronald McDonald due to her striking, wide smile. Josh's life was deeply affected by his parents' divorce. He had been grappling with depression and mental health issues for years. Those close to him at the time had no idea how desperate his situation would become. On an ordinary day, in February 2016, Donnie received an unexpected visit from the police. When she opened the door, they asked about her relationship to Josh Papenheim. After identifying herself as his mother, the officers delivered devastating news that would forever change her life. Tragically, 20-year-old Josh had taken his own life, leaving his loved ones reeling from the loss. As Donnie would later recall, Sarah cried so intensely that her tear ducts dried up. Under Josh's obituary, her message still remains, promising to love her son forever. Sarah and her brother Josh were extremely close. She was devastated by his passing and the fact that he had taken his own life. Rather than letting the pain overwhelm her, Sarah decided to pursue psychology to help people struggling with mental health issues in the future. Sarah had been in touch with Nico Carson, a guy from the Netherlands, for a while. She decided to move there and enroll at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where she began studying psychology. Nico, being a native speaker, helped Sarah navigate her loss, assisted her with her studies, and supported her in any way possible. Although Sarah was dedicated to her studies and work, her passion for music never faded. She reached out to Bernard Allison, a fellow musician and friend she had performed with in the past, to share her excitement about finally saving up enough money to buy the drum kit she had always dreamed of owning. In January 2017, Bernard Allison went on tour in Europe with his band. On Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended his concert in Germany with Nico, and as soon as Bernard saw her, he invited her on stage to play the drums alongside him. just like they used to do. Sarah lived in a third-floor apartment in a complex just a mile from the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she was looking forward to spending Christmas back home in the United States. Her flight was scheduled about a week before New Year's Eve. But everything took an unexpected turn on December 12th. Donnie Odegaard's heart sank when she saw a police officer standing on her doorstep, a sight that brought back painful memories of 2016, the year her son passed away. As the officer began questioning her about her daughter, her legs started shaking uncontrollably. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, yet she couldn't bring herself to accept the devastating news. The officer, convinced that he was speaking to Sarah Papenheim's mother, delivered the heartbreaking news. Her daughter had passed away. Donnie felt like she'd been punched in the gut. The news was too much to bear, and she lost consciousness. This tragedy was all too familiar. She had lost her 20-year-old son just a few years ago, and now her 21-year-old daughter was gone too. The girl lived in a third-floor apartment in a complex where most residents were students. For the past year, Sarah had rented an apartment there and shared it with Joel Schelling, a fellow student and talented double bass musician like herself. Their shared passion for music brought them together. Sarah was an outgoing and cheerful person, unlike her roommate Joel, who had a short temper and occasionally quarreled with her. Despite his difficult behavior, Sarah was loyal and didn't want to abandon him to his problems, possibly because she remembered what had happened to her brother. 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor in Wisconsin, expressing fear of Joel, who had told her he intended to harm 3 people he disliked. A couple of days before she passed away, Sarah also spoke to her mother on the phone, sharing her growing concerns about Joel's behavior. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live immediately and to keep her distance from Joel until she moved out. On Wednesday, December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., Sarah and Joel got into a loud fight at their apartment, which prompted their next-door neighbors to call the police. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor, unconscious and suffering from multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah sadly died. Joel, her roommate, was not present at the scene. It seemed he had fled, and the police launched a search for him. After questioning neighbors on the same floor, the officers discovered that Joel had hastily left the apartment, taking a large double bass with him. This unusual detail was included in the description sent out to authorities less than 2 hours after the crime. The police eventually tracked down 23-year-old Joel Schelling at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. As it turned out, Joel was heading to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. During the train ride, he called his mother and confessed to killing Sarah. The judge ordered Schelling to be held for 14 days to determine if he suffered from mental health issues. An autopsy revealed that Sarah's body had 27 stab wounds, including several in her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah's death, Donnie Odegaard traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned to their home country. This required raising $40,000, which the family was able to do with the help of supportive individuals. Donnie's first priority was to discover if Sarah had reported to the police that her roommate was planning to attack 3 people. It turned out that Sarah had not contacted the authorities. However, she had reached out to social workers who assist people with psychological difficulties. These social workers visited Schelling and found him to be calm, straightforward, and coherent in his answers, giving them the impression that he was normal. The next day, Sarah had to contact social services again. This was because Schelling, in a rage, started hitting himself with a hammer and threatened to harm several people soon. Sarah was worried that Joel would discover she had reported him to the authorities. However, the social worker didn't have time to respond to Sarah's second request because she had already died. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Papenheim's death. He admitted his guilt, but claimed he didn't recall taking her life. He remembered the fight, but when he came to, he was already in the shower, cleaning himself. The trial began in March 2019. Sarah's mother, Donnie Odegaard, attended every hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling claimed he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. When the judge asked Schelling if the voices in his head had told him to fight Sarah, he said he didn't know and couldn't recall. He also claimed he didn't remember what sparked the fight between them. Before the verdict was announced in December 2019, medical experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple mental health disorders and required long-term treatment. However, they concluded that he was still responsible for taking Sarah Papenheim's life. The experts reasoned that Schelling remembered the start of the fight and physically struggling with Sarah, and he had the ability to choose whether to stop or grab the knife. He chose the latter and therefore should be punished. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence for Schelling, but the Rotterdam judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison, followed by involuntary commitment to a psychiatric hospital. The court explained that it rejected the prosecutor's 10-year sentence request due to Schelling's youth and his significantly impaired mental state at the time of the crime. As a result, Schelling cannot be fully held accountable for the proven facts of the case. The court has stated that, due to the seriousness and unpredictability of the crime, as well as the suspect's severe psychological disorders, there is a high likelihood of him committing another violent crime. The suspect requires long-term treatment and supervision in a clinical setting for his chronic conditions. The court views the psychiatric detention as a form of punishment for Schelling, who has expressed willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. Schelling will remain in detention for treatment until the court, which will review his progress every 2 years, decides that he is well enough to be released. Additionally, the court has ordered Schelling to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Donnie Odegaard was outraged by the sentence, claiming it was not justice. In her opinion, the minimum sentence in America should have been at least 10 years. She pointed out that Schelling could have faced life imprisonment or even the death penalty, ensuring he would never have the chance to commit such a heinous crime again. Her main concern was that Schelling might be released on parole in just 4 years, a prospect she vowed to fight against, using every means at her disposal to keep him incarcerated for as long as possible. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers Sarah had contacted. The conclusion was that they were not culpable, as they lacked the necessary expertise to identify the disorders Schelling was subsequently diagnosed with. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin-Kraft. Christina Rose Carlin-Kraft was born on November 11, 1983, in a coastal town in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Kraft and Deanne Carlin. She had a natural flair for being in front of the camera, which would eventually shape her career path. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City for several years. However, her ultimate dream was to become a model, and her determination paid off. She eventually found success in the modeling industry. In her promotional material, Christina revealed that she enjoyed participating in photo shoots featuring high-end lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend she met on a 3-day Maxim magazine shoot, Christina was a charming and beautiful woman with a great sense of humor. With dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the essence of a fashion model. Christina had always dreamed of being on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, she met Alex Ciartielli. They started dating soon after, and Alex became her supportive partner, never opposing her career choices. After a long-term relationship, they got engaged. The couple stayed together until Christina's death. Christina achieved her goal of becoming Cybergirl of the Month for May 2009 and was invited to the Playboy Mansion. She attended parties at the mansion, gaining entry into the glamorous world. This success marked the peak of her career, and her ambitions soared, especially after meeting Hugh Hefner, whose attention was hard to capture. However, despite this, Christina failed to become a Playboy magazine model. Thousands of girls send their photos to the magazine, but only one is chosen. At 26, Christina was considered too old for the magazine, which typically features younger models. This setback affected her confidence, but she continued modeling. Her extensive portfolio included work with Redken, Moxham, Victoria's Secret, Vanity Fair, and many others. To further her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, not all brands were willing to work with her due to her explicit photo shoot. Christina's career began to decline after her appearance in Playboy, ultimately coming to an end. Overcoming this challenging period in her life was undoubtedly tough, but she always had Alex's support. Known for her elegant appearance, captivating beauty, and scandalous behavior, Christina made headlines in 2016 for causing a scene at the Smith, a restaurant in New York. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin-Kraft, 34, and her male companion got into an argument with the manager, Sergei Anakin, on March 6 over their bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager intervened. Witnesses claim Christina was drunk and falsely accused the manager of pushing her, but surveillance footage proved otherwise. She allegedly struck someone in the neck around 10 p.m., causing redness and significant pain. Christina was charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, the DA offered her a deal, and the charges were dropped on the condition that she remains trouble-free for 6 months. Christina has always had a fondness for Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, which she considered a safe haven. With this in mind, Alex purchased an apartment in Ardmore in 2018 and relocated to Pennsylvania with her. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore wasn't as safe as she had thought. On August 18, 2018, she contacted the police to report a robbery. Earlier that evening, Christina had spent time at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night were hazy. The next thing she recalled was waking up the following morning, feeling groggy and suspecting that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. She had no recollection of how she got home or if anyone had accompanied her. At the time, Alex was away on a business trip. Feeling uneasy and anxious, Christina repeatedly expressed her concerns about her safety. During the investigation, police obtained CCTV footage showing a car arriving at Christina's apartment around 3 a.m. Unconscious in the back seat, Christina was being driven by a thief who stole her keys, entered her home, and plundered over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer bags, pillows, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The thief remained in the apartment for about an hour and a half before returning to the car, helping Christina inside, and then leaving her in the hallway. They placed the keys back in her purse and drove away. The police swiftly identified the perpetrator using a credit card statement. The driver was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. He was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with Virginia license plates. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17th, which was confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. While the police were still searching for Andre Melton to recover Christina's stolen items, a far more serious crime took place. Just 4 days later, on August 22, 2018, Alex Chelly called the police, asking them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin-Kraft, as he was unable to contact her and was on his way home. Christina wasn't answering her calls or texts. Upon arriving home, Alex found the apartment door locked from the inside. He then checked the security system, revealing that someone had opened the front door and the balcony door during the night. The police were called to the address and had to force entry by breaking down the front door, which was locked from the inside. Upon entering the apartment, they were immediately met with signs of a crime scene, including visible blood. A body lay on the bed, covered with a blanket. Lifting the blanket, they found a woman who had been severely beaten. Unfortunately, it was Christina Carlin-Kraft, and she was already dead. Her body showed signs of blows all over, and her nose was broken. There was also a strangulation mark around her neck. It was later discovered that Christina had been strangled with her own sweatpants. When the detectives identified the victim, they had to break the devastating news to Alex, who was waiting outside. His beloved Christina was dead. This shocking revelation sparked immediate suspicion, as the people closest to the victim are often implicated in such cases. The police did not dismiss the possibility that Alex might be the perpetrator. Alex and Christina had a long history together, and anything could have transpired between them. It was Alex who had contacted the police station, expressing concern for Christina's safety, only for her to be found dead soon after. These events seemed too coincidental. It was possible that Alex had orchestrated the scenario to divert suspicion away from himself. The investigators requested that Alex accompany them to the police station to answer some questions. He agreed without hesitation. During the questioning, Alex explained that he had an urgent work commitment in New York on August 21st and had planned to return. The following night, August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to bid her good night, but she didn't answer. Given her habitual wakefulness at this hour, Alex grew anxious. He made several more calls, but Christina remained unresponsive. After reviewing the security system, he discovered suspicious activity in the apartment that night, prompting him to relinquish his business and rush back to Ardmore. After hearing Alex's story, the police no longer believed he was responsible for Christina's murder. His alibi checked out, and he couldn't have been in two places at once. They cleared him as a suspect, but the question remained: who killed Christina? Who would want her dead? The investigators looked into Christina's report of a robbery 4 days before her murder, suspecting a connection between the two crimes. This led them to Andre Melton, the thief who stole from Christina's apartment. Maybe he returned to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Perhaps he discovered she had reported him to the police and decided to take revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was found, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his address, however, they discovered he was no longer there. Despite his absence, they did find some of Christina's belongings still at the location. The police also managed to obtain surveillance footage from the night of the crime, which showed Christina leaving her apartment, then returning a few hours later with an unknown man. The footage was recorded at 3:08 a.m., and surprisingly, the man was not Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage revealed that the unknown man did not leave Christina's apartment again. The police later found an explanation for this using CCTV cameras on the streets of Ardmore. They discovered that Christina had visited a Philadelphia bar before returning to her apartment. Investigators reviewed the CCTV footage from the bar, which showed Christina meeting a man who later hugged her. This was the same man she had returned to her apartment with. After leaving the bar, Christina and her new friend were involved in an altercation. In the days that followed, detectives worked to reconstruct Christina's movements on the day she died, gathering data to piece together the events leading up to the crime. The police quickly ruled out Melton as a suspect, as he was not with Christina on the day of her death. However, it remained unclear whether her death was connected to the earlier robbery or simply a coincidence. On August 25th, the police received a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who had driven Christina and her companion that night, came forward. According to Sanford, Christina and the man had hailed him down rather than using the taxi app and had negotiated the fare. Sanford reported that the couple seemed affectionate and did not arouse his suspicion. When they arrived at their destination, Christina got out and directed Sanford where to go. It turned out that she didn't have any cash and offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford declined. Her friend then offered him $100 to wait for 10 to 15 minutes while they went inside. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her companion had returned. The couple, Christina and Alex, entered their second-floor apartment around 3 a.m. About an hour later, at 4 a.m., Christina made a call to her cousin, but she didn't speak. Instead, her cousin heard a man's voice in the background, warning Christina not to call the police. The call abruptly ended before the cousin could gather more information. It remains unclear why the cousin didn't call 911 after hearing this. The police were able to piece together the crime's timeline thanks to the door sensors in the apartment, which recorded exact times for each door opening. The records showed that someone opened the door at 3:08 a.m. and again at 5:10 a.m. Around the same time, the system detected that someone had opened the sliding glass door on the balcony, which explained why the surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment, leading them to assume that the perpetrator had jumped off the balcony. Police sought public's help through media, releasing surveillance images of two men, Andre Melton and the one at Christina's apartment the night she died. In a surprising turn of events, Andre Melton, whose whereabouts was still unknown to the detectives, contacted the police himself. He confessed to stealing valuables from Christina, but vehemently denied any involvement in her murder. The police were perplexed by this unexpected call, as they were still unable to establish a definitive link between the theft and Christina's death. It was possible that this was all part of a strategy devised by the two suspects. It seemed that Melton's intention was not to surrender to the authorities, but to proclaim his innocence in Christina's murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects featured in the released pictures. He shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. The caller revealed that the suspect had previously chased a woman in Love Park, Philadelphia, and followed her into the local family court building, where he molested her and became aggressive, shouting and causing destruction. The incident led to a 2-hour stay in a psychiatric hospital, costing $70. However, the suspect was admitted without being identified, as no one wanted to deal with him. The police were left with a mystery on their hands. The caller then provided even more critical information, stating that the suspect bragged about recently strangling a woman, taking great pleasure and satisfaction from the act. Upon hearing this, investigators strongly believed that they had found the killer of Christina Carlin-Kraft. The police station received another call from a man who claimed to be a relative of the suspect from Philadelphia. He identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, who had previously served a prison sentence for robbery. Harris was released from prison on July 15th, just 5 weeks before Christina's death. After conducting a thorough background check, investigators concluded that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no connection and had never crossed paths before. Therefore, the police ruled out any possibility of a link between the two crimes. Furthermore, the police gained access to Harris's phone records, which revealed that he had sent several messages on August 22nd. One of the texts mentioned that he had met an attractive woman and was planning to visit her apartment on August 28th. With this new evidence, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris and deemed it crucial to apprehend him as soon as possible, as they were unsure of his next move. However, tracking Harris down proved to be a challenge, as he had left no trace. Investigators finally got a break when they contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, and learned that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, they discovered that Harris was already on the bus when they spoke with his sister. The police realized they wouldn't be able to catch up with him, leaving the Pittsburgh police as their last hope. It was essential to be in the right place at the right time to apprehend Harris. The police investigating Christina's death reached out to the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They provided the exact time of the bus's arrival in Pittsburgh and sent over a photo of Harris. The fugitive task force then set up an ambush, blocking all potential escape routes, ready to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. Shortly after, one of the employees spotted the bus approaching. They allowed Harris time to calmly disembark, avoiding any sudden moves that might provoke a reaction. About 10 minutes later, a policeman intercepted him. I saw his eyes scanning, searching for an escape route, but it was too late. According to a Pittsburgh police officer, when the officer asked Harris to identify himself, he provided a false name. He was subsequently arrested and taken into custody at the police station. Detectives from Philadelphia traveled to Pittsburgh to question Harris. They requested that he recount the events of the night he met Christina. Harris claimed to have seen her on multiple occasions at bars and nightclubs in Philadelphia. Christina Carlin-Kraft was struggling to adjust to her new life in New York, which had drastically altered her daily routine and environment. As a result, she would frequently visit bars, cafes, and nightclubs, but she was always by herself since Alex was constantly working and she had not yet formed new friendships. It was common for men at these establishments to approach her, taking advantage of her solo status. Harris was one of those men. Harris claimed he was drunk and high on illegal drugs when he met Christina. They had a drink, then went to her place, where they drank more and had consensual sex. Harris demanded $1,200, but Christina refused, sparking a heated argument. Harris said she hit him with a wine bottle, so he hit her back, causing her to fall. When she tried to call the police, he strangled her with sweatpants until she passed out. Jonathan Harris's story had inconsistencies. A toxicology report on Christina's body found only alcohol, contradicting his claim of a single hit. When confronted, he admitted lying. Initially, Harris denied involvement, but later confessed to beating her, saying, "I panicked," and covering her because he didn't want to see her. When the trial began, Harris, despite having confessed to the crime, pleaded not guilty, like many other criminals who later retract their confessions. However, the investigators had assembled a substantial amount of evidence, making it difficult for Harris and his lawyer to build a strong defense. They anticipated a sentence of 22 to 40 years for third-degree murder and attempted to avoid a life sentence. Nevertheless, the prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that convinced the court that the crime was premeditated. During the trial, the court heard testimony from a man who had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic. This same man had previously contacted the police. He revealed that Jonathan Harris had earlier confessed to him, stating, "There's nothing like squeezing somebody and feeling the last breath leave their body." In August 2019, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 22 to 45 years. The judge added the extra decades to ensure that Harris would never be freed, sending a message to future governors or pardon boards. In December 2018, Philadelphia police arrested Andre Melton for the robbery of Christina Carlin-Kraft's apartment. In March 2020, the court sentenced him to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, which means Melton will be under court supervision for a total of 7 years. Before learning his fate, Melton said, "I would like to apologize to the family for any grief or pain that I caused. I am not the bad person the district attorney is trying to make me out to be." Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Zoe Nelson. Zoe Nelson was born on August 13, 1992, in Wishaw, Scotland. At the age of 18, she lived with her mother, stepfather, and 2 younger sisters, including 16-year-old Laura Ann, in New Mains, a village on the eastern edge of Wishaw, about 18 miles southeast of Glasgow. Zoe attended Motherwell College, where she was a popular student with many friends. A complicated romantic situation developed when both Zoe and her sister Laura Ann became involved with the same 20-year-old man, Robert Bain, who lived with his grandparents about a mile from the Nelson family home. Tensions between the sisters increased, leading to conflicts. On May 22, 2010, Zoe met Robert outside her home, which upset Laura Ann. When Laura Ann saw this, she rushed out of the house to confront Zoe. Their 40-year-old mother, Mary Ann Nelson, witnessed the fight between her daughters. According to Mary Ann, Laura Ann tried to provoke Zoe by flicking her hair and attempted to slap her face, leading to a physical altercation at the end of the driveway. Mary Ann intervened, breaking up the fight and telling the sisters to leave and not come back. Zoe complied with her mother's order and never returned home. At around 11 p.m. that same day, some locals spotted someone setting a fire in the wooded area known as Monkey Hill. The smell of smoke drifted to nearby homes, but at the time, no one paid much attention. Zoe's aunt, 35-year-old Shirley Nelson, later remembered that night, describing how she was sitting in her garden in New Mains after finishing her second shift at work. She and her sister sat in the back of the house until about 11 p.m. when it got cooler and they smelled smoke. However, they didn't think anything of it because of the warm weather. The next day, Zoe's family tried to contact her, but no one answered. On the afternoon of May 23rd, Stuart Bell, a 45-year-old government employee from Wishaw, rode his motorcycle into a nearby wooded area and saw something strange. At first, he thought it was a charred tailor's dummy, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was a human body that had been badly damaged in a fire. He immediately went home to call the police, who arrived 15 to 20 minutes later. When the police arrived, they sealed off the area, as nothing so horrific had ever occurred there before. News of the body's discovery quickly spread, and when Zoe's family learned of it, her mother, Mary Ann Nelson, went to the police to report her daughter's disappearance, which had happened after they had fought, and Mary Ann told Zoe not to come home. The police soon broke the devastating news to the Nelson family. Zoe had fallen victim to a crime. Mary Ann issued a statement through the police, describing Zoe as a typical popular 17-year-old with a strong presence in the local community and many friends. In just a couple of months, she would have turned 18. Her family is deeply distraught over her loss. Zoe's stepfather, Daniel, and her sisters, Laura Ann and Ashley, are heartbroken about what happened, and the family is urging anyone with information to come forward and assist the police in their investigation. Hugh Logan, the principal of Motherwell College, where Zoe studied vehicle body repair, expressed shock on behalf of the college community upon learning the dreadful news of her death. He described Zoe as a very popular student and conveyed that the college's thoughts are with her family and friends. A thorough investigation of the scene spanned several days, with a team of at least 50 police officers working on the case. Detective Derek Robertson, part of the main investigation team, lamented the loss of Zoe's young life and vowed that his officers would not rest until the perpetrator was caught. He urged anyone who saw Zoe between 5 p.m. and 11:20 p.m. on Saturday night to come forward and assist the investigation. Robertson noted that, given the area's popularity on the hottest day of the year, numerous people would have been taking shortcuts and sunbathing, and that the police were particularly interested in speaking with those who may have used the dirt trails, including one that crossed near the location where Zoe's body was found. Zoe was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a heavy build and collar-length brown hair. At the time she went missing, she was wearing gray tracksuit bottoms, a white long-sleeved top, and black Nike trainers. The detectives have been reviewing CCTV footage, phone records, and computer data, as well as conducting door-to-door inquiries and speaking to Zoe's friends and family to try to recreate her last movements on May 26th. The police released video footage from a local shop where Zoe was seen just hours before she died. These small details were crucial to the investigation, as they helped the police trace Zoe's movements and ultimately led to the arrest of the person responsible for her death. After examining the crime scene, investigators found a red plastic sombrero-shaped cap from a Sierra Silver tequila bottle near the body and an empty bottle of the same brand on the other side of a small walkway nearby. Due to the body being exposed to fire for approximately 7 hours, forensic experts faced limitations in determining the exact cause of death. The body was discovered with a partially melted plastic bag covering most of the face, leading pathologists to conclude that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. Despite the damage, the palm of the right hand remained relatively intact, allowing 2 DNA samples to be collected, one matching Zoe Nelson herself and the other belonging to an unidentified male. Ultimately, the official cause of death was recorded as undetermined. By May 28th, police had gathered several witness statements that provided a disturbing account of Zoe's last days. One witness reported seeing Zoe with a heavily intoxicated and aggressive man at around 5:15 p.m. on May 22nd, who was hitting her on the head. Another witness claimed to have seen Zoe walking with a man with a tattooed face near his home in New Mains. A third witness described seeing Zoe with a similar-looking man in New Mains, who appeared angry, hit a lamppost, and threatened to take someone's life that night. Multiple witnesses came forward, all describing the same young man, 20-year-old Robert Bain. Notably, Robert Bain had a prior criminal record despite his youth. He had served 18 months in prison for robbery and was released just 7 weeks before Zoe's death. Additionally, he had been arrested 4 times for possessing illegal substances, though as a juvenile, he faced minimal consequences. Investigators started to view Robert Bain as a prime suspect in the case. Before they could take further action, Bain surprisingly turned up at the police station in Wishaw around 5:50 p.m. on May 28th. He was clearly intoxicated, slurring his words, and wanted to make a statement. Bain claimed that a few days prior, he had been in Motherwell, where he got on a bus to return home. During the journey, he said, a man named Stuart Campbell boarded the same bus. Bain alleged that he approached Campbell and asked if he had been with Zoe on the previous Saturday night. According to Bain, Campbell's response was incriminating. Yes, I took her life. This was the first mention of Stuart Campbell's name during the entire investigation, whereas Robert Bain's name had come up repeatedly. As a result, the police arrested Bain on the same day. A strong justification for Robert Bain's arrest would emerge during his trial. At the time of his arrest, Bain claimed to have last seen Zoe on the morning in May. However, forensic tests revealed incriminating evidence against him. A DNA sample from Zoe Nelson's hand revealed not only her own DNA, but also traces of another person's DNA, which matched part of Bain's DNA profile. Additionally, DNA evidence found on a tequila bottle and its cap, discovered near Zoe's body, matched both Zoe Nelson and Robert Bain. According to the forensic expert, this suggested that both individuals had consumed from the bottle and then replaced the cap. Expert Marie Campbell stated that the scientific findings indicated that Robert Bain's DNA was deposited between Zoe Nelson's fingers and on her right palm. The chances of the DNA found on the red plastic sombrero lid belonging to anyone other than Robert Bain were an astonishing 10 million to 1. Robert Bain was accused of being involved in Zoe Nelson's death due to multiple eyewitness accounts and DNA evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty and acted defiantly, even confronting one of the investigators. He also denied an earlier alleged assault on Zoe, where a witness claimed he struck her on the head with his fist. Hundreds attended Zoe Nelson's funeral at Coltness Memorial Church on June 16, 2010. She was laid to rest at Campus Nathan Cemetery. Over 200 mourners, including her mother, sisters, and grandmother, gathered to pay their respects. Reverend Graham Rayburn led the service, noting the large turnout as a testament to Zoe's significant impact. He described her as a happy, cheerful teenager with a big heart who loved fast cars and rangers. Sadly, she never met her newborn nephew or got to contact her biological father. On March 1, 2011, Robert Bain's trial began, during which he maintained his innocence. Testifying in court, Zoe Nelson's teenage friends recalled a conversation they had with her a week before her death, in which she attributed her scratches and bruises to a fight with Robert Bain. According to her friends, Zoe described Bain as bossy, unstable, and prone to anger over minor issues. He also controlled her social circle, dictating which friends she could see. Although Zoe and Bain's relationship was relatively short-lived, given he had only been out of prison for 2 months, he exerted significant influence over her and also pursued a relationship with her 16-year-old sister, Laura Ann. Notably, Laura Ann was aware of her sister's death 5 days before the body was discovered by a passerby, but kept this secret until the trial, where it was revealed that Bain had taken Laura Ann to the location of Zoe's body. Laura Ann, who testified from behind a screen to avoid seeing Bain, recounted that on May 23rd, the day after her argument with Zoe, she visited Bain's address to return some clothes. Upon arrival, she observed that Robert seemed nervous and had been consuming vodka. They soon left the house, with Bain claiming he wanted to show her something. According to Laura Ann, he led her to the location where Zoe's body lay. Recognizing the ranger's tattoo on her arm, Laura Ann identified the body as her sister. During court questioning, Laura Ann stated that Bain had confessed to hitting Zoe, and when Zoe attempted to retaliate, he lost control and took her life. Bain then allegedly used gasoline in an attempt to eliminate any evidence of the crime. Laura Ann confessed to walking with Bain on the day following the discovery of the body. Afterwards, she visited his home, spending time in his bedroom, where they listened to music together. She also had a phone conversation with him that lasted around an hour. A friend of Laura Ann, who testified in court, recalled that Laura Ann seemed happy and normal, despite knowing her sister was dead. When questioned about why she didn't reveal everything to the police during her initial interrogation, Laura Ann explained that she was afraid that if she told them, her mother wouldn't believe her and would think she was responsible for Zoe's death. The jury heard testimony from Laura Ann Nelson, who stated that Robert Bain had threatened her, saying she would face the same consequences as Zoe if she told anyone about his actions. On March 25, 2011, a jury of 7 men and 7 women delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. As the verdict was read, Bain became violent, requiring physical restraint. Handcuffed, he jumped up in the dock, struggling with security officers and police, and headbutting one of them. He also shouted insults and threats at Zoe Nelson's family, forcing the courtroom to be cleared while order was restored. After a 20-minute adjournment, Judge Lady Dorian agreed to proceed with the trial in Bain's absence. In a separate matter, Robert Bain was acquitted of stealing alcohol from an Asda store in New Mains on May 22nd, as well as disorderly conduct related to yelling, cursing, and waving a knife in various streets in Wishaw on the same day. Bain was also acquitted of stealing Zoe's cell phone, which was found in the woods, and of threatening a police officer during an interview at the Motherwell police station on May 28th. On April 27, 2011, Robert Bain was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years for taking the life of Zoe Nelson. He received another 6 years for the obstruction of justice charge, and both sentences were to be served concurrently. The judge, Lady Dorian, described the crime as appalling and shocking. On Christmas Eve 2022, 29-year-old Laura Ann Nelson was found dead in her apartment after not being heard from for days. She was left with 2 children, ages 3 and 4. Her death was not considered criminal, as she had health problems, namely type 1 diabetes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marta del Castillo. Marta del Castillo was born on June 19, 1991, in Seville, Spain, to Eva Casanova and Antonio del Castillo. At 17, her life took a devastating turn. On January 24, 2009, Marta was chatting with her best friend, Sylvia Fernandez, when she abruptly ended the conversation, telling her she had to leave in a hurry because her boyfriend Miguel Carcano was waiting downstairs. She promised to fill her friend in on everything when she returned, saying she needed to clarify some issues in their relationship. In the hallway, Marta encountered her father, who cautioned her against getting on Miguel's motorcycle, but she simply kissed him on the cheek and left. At 5:30 p.m., Marta departed, and as the hours ticked by with no sign of her, her family grew increasingly worried. Her mother began calling acquaintances who might know something about Marta's whereabouts, including Carcano. Everyone seemed to think she was with Miguel, but when he failed to answer their calls, Marta's father decided to visit the boy's house. He rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one responded. It wasn't until they managed to contact Samuel Benitez, a close friend of Miguel's, that they learned Marta had been dropped off at his house around midnight. This struck Marta's mother as suspicious, given the time was only 11:45. At 2 a.m., Marta's family reported her disappearance, but they had no idea it would become one of the most sensational cases in the country's history. 4 hours later, the police disclosed that Marta's boyfriend, Miguel Carcano, was already a suspect. At 1:30 p.m., a third report was filed, but the police failed to act, leaving the family increasingly frustrated. It wasn't until 17 hours after the initial request for help, as stipulated by protocol, that the officers finally began searching for Marta. In the days that followed, the family took it upon themselves to gather statements from relatives and friends of the young girl. On January 27, 2009, the family held their first press conference, simultaneously launching a campaign to find Marta. The next day, approximately 2,000 people protested in Seville, demanding the young girl's safe return under the rallying cry, "We are all Marta." Another demonstration was convened on February 7th, drawing around 3,000 people. The case continued to captivate the nation, dominating television and newspaper headlines. After 21 days of searching, the police finally located Miguel Carcano on February 13th. The 20-year-old took full responsibility for the case, confessing that he had murdered Marta and dumped her body into the Guave River near his apartment. He also revealed a crucial detail: he did not act alone. He identified Samuel Benitez as one of his accomplices, claiming Benitez had helped dispose of the body. Benitez accepted culpability. Later, Miguel implicated Javier Garcia Marin, a troubled miner known as El Cuco, and Francisco Delgado, his brother, as well as his girlfriend Maria Garcia, as co-conspirators. All 5 were arrested. The subsequent interrogations yielded a wave of contradictions, while a thorough search for Marta's body in the river was simultaneously launched. On February 16th, Carcano repeated his statement before a judge, in contrast to his friend Samuel, who distanced himself from the case, denying any involvement in Marta's murder and attributing his earlier confession to police pressure on March 18th. Miguel Carcano requested to revise his statement, altering his account of events. He claimed that he and El Cuco had assaulted Marta at knife point, after which the miner strangled her. They then transported her body to Delgado's house and subsequently disposed of it in a garbage container. In response to these declarations, the judge ordered the search efforts in the Guave River to be suspended and redirected the investigation to a landfill. Marta's father pointed the finger at Delgado's girlfriend, as her father worked at a biological waste crematorium, suggesting that the body might have been incinerated. This theory gained significant media attention, but the police pressed on with their search. On November 16, 2009, Miguel's preventive detention term ended, and he was moved to a supervised flat to await trial. In February 2011, he faced retrial on charges of abuse and murder. Although he was cleared of these charges due to lack of sufficient evidence, he received a 2-year and 11-month sentence in a juvenile detention center for concealing Carcano's crimes. On October 17, 2011, the trial of the 4 adult defendants finally began. During the trial, Miguel Carcano provided new details about Marta's murder, stating he had struck her with an ashtray during a heated argument, which led to her death. He revealed that his previous statements about abusing her were false. His brother, his brother's girlfriend, and Benitez maintained their innocence, claiming they knew nothing about Marta's body, and that Carcano fabricated stories to shift the blame. By November 22, 2011, forensic police had confirmed the presence of Marta's blood on Miguel's jacket and a mix of Miguel's and Maria Garcia's genetic profiles on a roll of fabric tape, a cord, and an extension cable believed to have been used to strangle Marta. This evidence contradicted Maria Garcia's alibi, as she had insisted she was only at the crime scene in the early morning and was unaware of the incident. The discovery of her lie led to accusations of desecrating the body and cover-up. Furthermore, the police identified up to 5 fingerprints on 3 alcohol bottles, including one belonging to El Cuco. Benitez was the only suspect against whom no evidence was found. By this point, the 5 youths were under intense public scrutiny. The initial trials took place with a significant police presence, and the prosecution sought prison sentences for Carcano, Benitez, Delgado, and Garcia, relying on a total of 90 witnesses, including national police officers and experts, 30,000 pH monitorings, crime scene photographs, DNA evidence collected by the forensic police, and items discovered at the Leon 13 residence. The trials sparked a public outcry, with people pressing against the police cordon, demanding to see Marta's body. Delgado and his girlfriend emerged, shrouded in bacchus and sunglasses, but they couldn't evade the crowd. A woman confronted them, hurling insults, while others tried to rip off their sunglasses, pushing them to expose their faces to the throng. During the trial, El Cuco's mother granted an interview, her face obscured. She vehemently maintained her son's innocence, claiming neither she nor he had any knowledge of Marta's whereabouts. Journalists' skepticism was palpable, labeling her a liar, but she remained unfazed. She received a considerable sum of €10,000 for the interview. A few days later, Marta's family petitioned for the earnings to be regulated and the money to be used to face her son's impending sentence. A key witness, a taxi driver, testified that he drove Delgado on the night of the crime. Shaken by a colleague's recent murder, he remembered a bald, bearded man who stared at him intensely and was dropped off at Leon 13th Street, the crime scene, for €8. However, the defense argued the fare should have been €5, not €8, questioning the driver's credibility. Marta's parents testified, describing the deep pain and suffering they were experiencing as a result of the situation. They had been forced to give up their jobs, seek psychiatric help, and even struggle with depression. Marta's sisters, their other 2 daughters, were also going through a very difficult time. The whole family just wanted the ordeal to come to an end. The jury's verdict in 2012 disappointed the family. Carcano got a 21-year, 3-month sentence for the girl's murder. He was banned from the city for 30 years and ordered to pay €280,000 to her parents and €30,000 to each sister for moral damage. 3 individuals, Delgado, Maria Garcia, and Sanel Benitez, were released from custody due to lack of evidence linking them to the crime scene at the time of the murder. The following year, Delgado and Benitez took action against Marta's family, demanding they cover the trial costs. In response, Marta's father vowed to pursue justice beyond Spain's borders, criticizing the country's justice system as outdated. He even threatened to take his case to Strasbourg, home to the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights. In December 2011, Marta's mother penned a heartfelt letter to Carcano, who was incarcerated at the time, pleading with him to end the anguish of not knowing the whereabouts of her daughter's body. She yearned for Marta to rest in peace in a place where she could visit, bring flowers, and converse with her. However, Carcano never responded to the letter. On January 24, 2012, 3 years after Marta's disappearance, widespread demonstrations erupted in cities and towns across Spain, demanding justice for the young girl. Incarcerated and facing threats from fellow inmates, Carcano later attempted to take his own life. As a result, he was transferred to a therapeutic unit, where he was denied visitation rights and phone privileges. The murderer was extremely active during his imprisonment, concocting as many as 7 different accounts of the crime, which led to several lawyers abandoning his defense. In his 2013 testimony, he implicated someone close to him as the perpetrator. Carcano claimed an argument erupted between him and his brother over the mortgage on their house at Leon 13. Before that, he wrote a letter to his family expressing his desire to stop covering for Delgado. According to this latest testimony, a dispute arose over a fraudulent loan, and the conversation escalated to the point where Delgado allegedly threatened his brother with a weapon. When Marta intervened, she supposedly received a fatal blow from the butt of Delgado's gun. Delgado then made a call, but Miguel claims he doesn't know who it was to or what was discussed. However, he remembers fleeing the house, leaving Marta lifeless in the room. At this point, El Cuco arrived, and Miguel requested his help to dispose of the body using a wheelchair. They transported the body to the Mahala farm in Lanada and buried it there. Marta's parents believed Carcano's story and respected him, despite the suspicious events that had unfolded. They asked for the investigation to be reopened, with a focus on Miguel's brother. However, the prosecution and the judge did not take the statements seriously. Marta's father decided to visit Carcano in prison, asking him to cooperate. He told Carcano that he had bought the house at Leon 13 and promised that it would be his once he was released if he helped find Marta's body. The search for Marta's body was one of the most expensive in the country's history, covering both land and sea. The initial search took place in the Guadalave River. However, when agents tried to recreate the events, several inconsistencies appeared. It became clear that it was impossible for the 3 individuals, Carano, El Cuco, and Benitez, to transport the body together on a motorcycle, especially since they would have had to carry Marta's body. During the reenactment, the body fell to the ground as soon as the motorcycle started moving. After Carano made the claim that Marta's body had been dumped in a trash bin, a massive search operation was launched at the city's main landfill. Due to the significant time that had passed since Marta's disappearance, and the enormous amount of waste the landfill received daily, the search team estimated they would need to sift through around 40,000 tons of garbage to find any evidence. The search effort lasted 32 days, but was unsuccessful, mainly because Carano kept changing his story, providing up to 4 different locations where he claimed the body was buried, prompting new searches each time. Search paused due to lack of funds during Interior Minister Alfredo Perez's tenure. In 2013, Carano accused his brother of Marta's murder, providing a new location. Despite damaged credibility, a new search was launched. Carano guided police to the area, but failed to provide precise directions. Police excavated 6 farms, scanning 10,000 square meters, but found no evidence. All the searches were in vain, and at the request of the parents, the search for the body was halted on 2015. The public ministry asked the defendants to jointly compensate the Ministry of the Interior with a sum of $666,329. Oscar presented himself to Roselia, Marta's mother, as a criminal, but in reality, he was an infiltrator seeking a confession. Over time, they began to meet frequently, and Roselia trusted him with the keys to her house. Oscar recorded 600 hours of conversation between Roselia and her surroundings. In October 2011, El Cuco was already granted release permits from the juvenile center to which he had been sent for covering up for Carano. During a conversation, Oscar asked the young man if he thought the police were following him, to which El Cuco responded affirmatively, asserting they would do so to find out where they got rid of Marta. This statement forever incriminated him. After finishing talking, El Cuco immediately realized what he had said and quickly rectified, asserting he hadn't done anything, while Oscar played along as if he hadn't noticed. In other tapes, El Cuco mocked the police's efforts to find the body, and Rosalia discussed how inept the investigators had been for not auditing the calls from her mobile phone. Despite the hard work of the man, those 600 hours of recordings were never judicialized. Only in 2022, 13 years after Marta's disappearance, did the infiltrators' work yield results. On May 26, 2022, dozens of people, especially neighbors of Marta's family, gathered at the courthouse doors wanting to accompany them due to the celebration of the new judicial process. Rosalia and El Cuco arrived at the courthouse shielded by the police, with the young man being entirely covered, wearing a large hoodie, a balaclava, sunglasses, and even gloves, while Rosalia was wearing sunglasses, a mask, and a headscarf. In 2011, El Cuco declared that he had not been in the flat on Lyon 13th Street where the crime occurred, but with several friends. He said he had gone home at 11:30 at night and had met his mother's partner, who had gone out to throw out the garbage, then had gone up to his house and had not left for the rest of the night. Rosalia, for her part, said she had gone out with her partner for drinks around 11:30 at night and had returned home around 1:30 in the morning on January 25th, finding her son asleep there. El Cuco confessed that on the night of January 24th, Carano called him after having murdered Marta and asked him for help to bury her body. Along with Benitez, they took his mother's car and went to Lyon 13, where Delgado was also found. Meanwhile, Rosalia was at the bar and stayed there until 4:30 in the morning when she got home, and her son was still missing. Both El Cuco and his mother were charged with perjury, the ACT aggravated by having obstructed the judicial procedure ongoing since 2009. Both El Cuco and Rosalia accepted responsibility for their acts. The trial was held, and the judge suspended all scheduled witness statements, leaving Marta's parents distressed as they had called Carcano to testify in hopes he would finally reveal their daughter's whereabouts. On June 9, 2022, both El Cuco and Rosalia were sentenced to 2 and 2 years in prison, and the judge also imposed a fine of €11,440 each and a civil liability payment of €30,000 to Marta's parents. However, they didn't care about the money. They still wanted just one thing: to find the body of their daughter. That same year, the investigative judge authorized the expert to access the mobile phones of Carano and Marta. However, he did not grant permission to do the same with the rest of the individuals involved in the case, as there currently is no evidence against them. Carcano consented to his phone being examined, insisting they would find evidence pointing to his brother as the actual murderer. Yet the main goal was to determine the location of the long-sought body. Although looking for new leads in the criminal case was prohibited, the expert never submitted his findings, and thus the case was closed indefinitely in November 2022. 13 years after Marta's murder, the civil court decided to close the separate investigation for the search of the body, deeming the legally stipulated investigation period as expired without any new significant discoveries. Marta's parents came to terms with the fact that Carcano would never reveal the location of their daughter's body and decided to sell the flat where the crime occurred. Marta's case will join countless other unresolved cases worldwide, with documents gathering dust on a desk. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, into a loving family with 2 siblings and parents who worked hard to provide the best possible life for their children. From a young age, Kate demonstrated a deep love for animals, which led her to volunteer at various animal shelters during her teenage years. Apart from her compassion for animals, Kate was also an accomplished dancer with a wide circle of friends and a radiant personality. To all appearances, Kate grew up in a supportive and nurturing environment, and in many ways, this was true. However, Kate's life took a dramatic turn just before she went off to college. In a private conversation with her parents, Kate revealed that she had been abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Although she chose not to disclose the identity of the perpetrator, her revelation sent shockwaves through her family. Her parents were unaware of the trauma Kate had been silently enduring for years, leaving them reeling from the news. After sharing her dark secret, Kate's parents did everything in their power to support her, but the trauma's consequences only seemed to intensify over time. Initially, Kate struggled with addiction, first with alcohol and later with illegal substances. Her parents suggested therapy, which she reluctantly agreed to. They also encouraged her to move back home, hoping the family's presence would help her cope. Despite being an independent adult, Kate agreed to return home. At first, therapy seemed to be having a positive impact, but Kate struggled to break free from the past's heavy burden and live life to the fullest. The psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression, but everything changed when her father, always concerned and eager to help, suggested a trip to anywhere she desired. Kate was thrilled by the idea and soon set her heart on traveling beyond the Arctic Circle. Her dream was to witness polar bears in their natural habitat, and despite her traumatic experience, her love for animals remained unwavering. Kate and her parents searched for the perfect tour and soon purchased tickets for a trip to the Arctic Circle. Kate was thrilled to be embarking on this adventure, and as a result, her parents witnessed a significant transformation in her demeanor, replacing her depressive state with a cheerful and optimistic outlook. When they finally embarked on the trip, Kate was ecstatic. During the journey, Kate and her parents had a fantastic time on the boat, which took them to the Arctic Circle, where Kate befriended a Russian tourist. They remained in contact throughout the trip and continued exchanging letters afterward. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, after returning home, she decided to visit Russia. Upon arriving, they reunited, and she even contemplated staying longer in the country, but due to visa problems, Kate was forced to return home. Despite this setback, it seemed that Kate had finally overcome her depression. Back home, she planned to resolve her visa issues and even started writing a book for her children. Her life was finally taking a turn for the better. On Saturday, June 12, 2009, Kate's life took a dramatic turn. Her family was away on a business trip, leaving her alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to reassure him that everything was okay, but this time, she failed to do so. Her concerned father tried calling her back, but there was no response. Given Kate's past struggles with alcohol and substance abuse, he asked someone to check on her at home. When the person arrived, Kate was nowhere to be found, but her bedroom light was still on, suggesting she might return soon. However, she didn't show up. Furthermore, Kate had left behind her essential medication, which she was supposed to take regularly. Despite their growing anxiety, Kate's parents decided not to panic and waited for her return, considering her age of 28 and ability to take care of herself. Her father decided to wait until Monday before involving the police. On Monday morning, Kate Waring's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check worth more than $4,000, supposedly signed by Kate. However, the bank couldn't get in touch with Kate directly, and as her father was a co-signer on her account, they reached out to him instead. The situation seemed highly unusual because Kate's father was certain that his daughter only had a few $100s in her account, which is why the bank's security team contacted him. However, Kate's signature on the check appeared genuine. They also provided the name of the man who had brought in the check, Ethan Mack. The father did not recognize him, but since the bank authenticated Kate's signature, he assumed the man was an acquaintance of his daughter. Nevertheless, he decided to contact the police, as Kate remained unreachable. The detectives began investigating Kate's disappearance, and Ethan Mack was their first point of inquiry. He claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to settle old debts. According to Ethan, he frequently provided Kate with money for clothing, jewelry, and other purchases. Conversations with Kate's friends revealed that she had been friends with Ethan for an extended period, although they indicated that their relationship had never been romantic in nature, despite being close. Ethan claimed that he and Kate met on Friday night and dined at a restaurant together. Afterwards, he drove her home and went about his own business. He even produced correspondence with Kate, which corroborated his account of their dinner. Ethan allowed the detectives to search his house, where he lived with his mother, as well as his car. Although the search yielded nothing suspicious, the police still found the situation surrounding the check to be peculiar and were not quick to dismiss him as a suspect. Ethan eventually called the police station, demanding to be left alone. The police worked to reconstruct the timeline of the Friday night Kate was last seen. She had met with her therapist that afternoon, followed by a trip to the gym. Later, she entered a store, purchasing a bottle of wine. Security cameras captured her on the phone at that time, possibly speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and they headed to a restaurant. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail. On the day she vanished, Kate had mentioned having some problems, but refused to elaborate. Her parents didn't recall this conversation until days later. Unfortunately, this information didn't aid the search, as weeks passed and Kate remained missing. Her parents felt the police weren't doing enough, given Kate's troubled past. However, in August, the case gained new life when a group of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it up. This group had been privately investigating unresolved cases, and Kate Waring's case had caught their attention. The team of 5 individuals, all with extensive police experience, began investigating Kate's disappearance. Former detective James Randall was the first to examine Kate's bedroom, where he found 2 suspicious elements. The first was a packet of medication that Kate regularly took, which was concerning because her parents confirmed she would never intentionally stop taking it. Therefore, the fact that the packet was left at home was alarming. The second suspicious element was Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which was peculiar because her parents had no idea where she had obtained it or why she needed it. The team then involved Bobby Mitter, an expert in gathering online information about individuals and tracking them. His skills proved invaluable, and he quickly discovered that on the night of her disappearance, around 10 p.m., Kate had called her friend James, who did not answer the phone. Instead, she left him a very troubling voicemail, claiming someone had stolen her credit cards. The investigation also revealed that her phone was last active at 1:53 a.m., when for some reason, she called her own voicemail. Further investigation led team member Lewis to discover that the call was made from the area of James Island, which was a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, former homicide detective Eugene Fraser, made an intriguing discovery. He spoke with several acquaintances living in James Island and found it odd that Ethan Mack, who had voluntarily let the police inspect his home, did not actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building, which Eugene was fortunate to uncover because one of his acquaintances happened to be the landlord of the apartment Ethan had rented. Digging deeper, the detectives discovered that the police had barely scratched the surface in their investigation into Ethan. A cursory search of his mother's house was all they had done. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and uncovered a vital lead. Ethan had a girlfriend, Heather Camp. When they questioned Kate's parents about her, her mother recalled a peculiar encounter. Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., about a month before her disappearance, when Kate was having issues with her Russian visa. Heather claimed her wallet had been stolen, leaving her penniless, and Kate sympathetically offered to lend her a substantial amount of money. Heather stated she had landed a pediatric surgeon position in South Carolina, set to start soon. Later, she announced her daughter had died in a New Jersey car crash, but her behavior was eerily calm, suggesting the news hadn't greatly affected her. The detectives also stumbled upon an intriguing fact. Heather was facing a fraud charge in Indiana for posing as a licensed doctor by falsifying documents. This new evidence forced them to re-examine the case from a different angle. They presented their findings to the police, but the authorities were surprisingly uncooperative and unwilling to continue the investigation. The team understood that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather irrefutable proof that linked Heather to Kate's disappearance. To achieve this, the team went to great lengths. They convinced the person who rented the apartment to Ethan Mack to install a secret camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a hidden GPS tracker in Ethan's car, enabling the team to track his movements and observe his activities. It didn't take long to yield results. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives found that he had visited numerous pawn shops across the city, selling small batches of various jewelry pieces. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives believed they were getting close to a vital clue. After some time, Ethan and Heather faced a serious problem when their landlord threatened to evict them due to non-payment of rent. The team knew that if this happened, they would lose the opportunity to observe the couple's behavior and movements. To prevent this, they tried to persuade the landlord to change his mind. At the same time, the detectives quickly came up with a new plan. They asked the landlord to give Ethan and Heather more time to pay the rent, but only if they agreed to sign a contract promising to clear the debt. The strategy worked, and as soon as the landlord handed over the contract, the team sent it to the laboratory. The goal was to compare Ethan and Heather's handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. This led to a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert conclusively confirmed that the check signature was from the same person who had signed Heather's name on the contract, proving that Heather had forged Kate's signature. The team knew the police would be slow to act, so they came up with a new plan. They persuaded the landlord to cooperate and told Ethan that his apartment needed to be treated for insects. The team leader wore an exterminator suit and went to the apartment with the landlord. They waited until Ethan left the apartment, confirmed by his car moving away from the house, before entering. However, they were met with an unwelcome surprise. Ethan was still at home. It turned out Heather was driving his car, but it was too late to abort the operation. The investigator had to improvise, insisting that fumigation was necessary and asking Ethan to wait outside while the chemicals were sprayed. Ethan, none the wiser, agreed and left. Meanwhile, the investigator carefully searched the apartment for any evidence linking Ethan to Kate's disappearance. He searched Ethan's backpack and found Chinese money, the same notes found on Kate's bed. This was their first clue. Unfortunately, no other potential clues were found. The investigator and landlord pretended to finish the treatment and left. The team needed to regroup and devise another plan. Upon reviewing the footage from the camera in front of Ethan's apartment, detectives identified a frequent visitor, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. They suspected Williams might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance, so they took a bold step. The team offered Williams a substantial sum of money in exchange for information about his friend's actions regarding Kate. They brought the money to Williams's apartment, but were met with an unexpected turn of events. At the time of the offer, Heather was at her home, where she overheard the entire conversation. Apparently, there was a prior discussion between Ethan and Williams. When the detective approached Williams, Heather panicked. She frantically called Ethan, explaining the situation. The investigation team was caught off guard and spent the following days struggling to determine their next move. In a shocking turn of events, Williams unexpectedly reached out to the detectives and asked them to come to his home to talk. When the detectives arrived at his apartment, Williams was surprisingly open and honest. He told them that although Ethan and Heather hadn't directly confided in him, he had had his suspicions about their involvement in Kate's disappearance. Williams then handed over an iPod he had received from Heather shortly after Kate went missing, which he had assumed belonged to Kate. The detectives analyzed the iPod and were able to trace its ownership to Kate using its serial number. This discovery provided the final piece of evidence needed to reopen the case. This time, the authorities couldn't ignore the evidence and finally arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence. She claimed Kate's body was located on Watala Island, approximately 20 miles from her residence. A police search team scoured the area all day, but failed to find Kate's body. It became apparent that Heather had deliberately misled them. Andy Savage decided to employ a new tactic. Recognizing that Heather was likely directly involved in Kate's murder, he met with her and promised to help. Andy offered her a deal. In exchange for revealing the exact location of Kate's body, he would assist in getting her off the forgery charges. Heather, believing it was her only chance, agreed. She provided a detailed description of the location, indicating that Kate's body was still on the outskirts of Watala Island. The detectives, minus the police, decided to investigate the location without alerting the authorities. However, they faced disappointment and did not find Kate's body. The next day, they returned and made a discovery. They found the remains of the young woman. Although the forensic doctors could not determine the cause of death, the perpetrator soon began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession for murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. It was discovered that she had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Later, she met Ethan and began a relationship with him. Ethan's trial began in October 2010, during which the prosecution presented Heather's testimony to reconstruct the events surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father, which would likely lead to police involvement. Heather confided in Ethan, who sided with her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan that night. Heather was also present. It appears that the pair attempted to negotiate with Kate at the restaurant to prevent her from exposing the deception. Heather may have promised to return the stolen credit cards and money, which were at Ethan's apartment when the three arrived. The court questioned Heather's account and ultimately sentenced her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly lighter sentence of 25 years, largely due to Heather also being charged with fraud. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shelby Von Holt. Shelby Von Holt was born on September 7, 2000 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA, as a cheerful young girl. She was the second of 5 children in her family, which consisted of her mother, Shah Hartman, father, Von Holt, older sister, Peyton Hartman, and younger siblings, Devin Von Holt and Isaac Von Holt. Shelby graduated from Troy Center High School in 2018 and spent the next 2 years working at a steakhouse and other places. During this time, she was contemplating her desired career path and seemed to be leaning towards a therapeutic field, although she had not yet decided on the exact specialty. As a 20-year-old, Shelby was living life to the fullest, known for her cheerful personality that made her the life of every party. She loved to smile, dance, sing, and spend time with friends. Notably, she was living independently, although the reasons for this were unclear. While she was not active on most social media platforms, she frequently posted cheerful photos on Facebook, many of which featured moments shared with her young niece, Camila, who is the daughter of her older sister, Peyton. According to her mother, Shelby met Valerie Rose Hardick, a 22-year-old woman, on Facebook. Although they reportedly did not have a close relationship, Valerie's life is shrouded in mystery, with rumors of a troubled childhood, questionable associations, and potential mental health challenges. On June 20, 2021, at 6:48 p.m., a 911 dispatcher received a distress call from a woman who managed to convey that she was injured and claimed Valerie shot her. Although it's unclear whether the woman provided her address or if the police traced the call, officers from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived at Shelby's residence shortly after. Upon arrival, the officers forced entry into the residence and found Shelby barely conscious, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, and surrounded by a large pool of blood. One officer stayed with Shelby, while the others conducted a protective sweep of the residence to ensure no other victims were present and that the perpetrator was not still inside. They did this while waiting for an ambulance and local firefighters to arrive. During this time, the officers attempted to provide first aid, and a surgeon asked Shelby if she knew who had shot her. Shelby identified Valerie as the attacker. Emergency medical personnel soon took over Shelby's care, rushing her to the nearby hospital, where she was in critical condition, but still alive. Meanwhile, Shelby's family was informed of the incident, and Fort Wayne Police Department officers began gathering evidence from her home. A doorbell camera was a significant piece of evidence, and after reviewing its footage, a person of interest was identified, though details were not publicly disclosed at the time. In a remarkable coincidence, a disturbing incident took place the day after Shelby's critical injury, approximately 50 kilometers away in Ohio. At around 10:30 a.m., the local police department received multiple calls about a suspicious-looking young woman lurking around a convenience store at a gas station. According to eyewitnesses, she had been wandering around the store and near the gas pumps for about an hour, seemingly trying to catch a glimpse of customers' credit card numbers as they made their purchases. Furthermore, the police had already received a prior call from a man who reported seeing the same woman earlier at the convenience store, claiming that she had pointed a gun at his back. After taking precautions, police officers arrived at the gas station where they found the woman and arrested her without any violence. The 22-year-old woman was identified as Valerie Rose Hardick. She had a 9mm handgun on her, which was the same type of weapon used in the attack on Shelby. Shelby had already identified her attacker as Valerie, which made the police even more certain they had the right person. The car Valerie was driving was the same one captured on Shelby's doorbell camera, leaving the scene just before Shelby called for help. Although the investigation is ongoing, Valerie was taken into custody and transferred to the county jail, where she will await her court hearing in the local municipal court. Shelby was clinging to life after being gravely injured by 89mm bullet wounds to her chest and abdomen. Doctors placed her in an induced coma and did everything they could to save her. Unfortunately, 3 days after the brutal attack on June 22, 2021, Shelby's body gave in to the injuries, and she was pronounced dead. According to her mother and media reports, Shelby died after undergoing 4 complex abdominal surgeries that did not yield the desired results. She received 20 blood transfusions, but the medical outlook was always bleak. If Shelby had survived, doctors believed her legs would have needed to be amputated. The brutal murder raises questions about what could drive someone to commit such a heinous crime. According to the limited information available, investigators attributed the motive to jealousy. It is alleged that Shelby was dating a man who Valerie was strongly attached to, although his identity was not revealed. Valerie was charged with criminal assault and aggravated threats. Initially held in Ohio on a $100,000 bail for threatening a man with a firearm at a gas station, Valerie was later transferred to Allen County to face charges for Shelby's murder. Shelby Von Holt's remains were memorialized in a private ceremony at a funeral home on June 29, 2021, and then cremated. In early 2022, Valerie Rose Hardick entered a plea deal in connection with Shelby's murder. Hardick pleaded guilty, citing mental illness as a defense. As part of the deal, the prosecution dropped a charge related to the use of a firearm during the crime, which could have added 20 years to her sentence. In September 2022, Hardick's sentencing hearing took place in the Superior Court of Allen County. As agreed, she pleaded guilty but mentally ill. During the hearing, her defense attorney presented mitigating circumstances, including her difficult upbringing, marked by her stepmother's death, abuse by her stepbrother, and a history of mental health issues. However, the prosecutors emphasized the jealousy motive behind Shelby's murder and highlighted Hardick's criminal history, which had escalated over time. They also noted that Hardick was on probation at the time of the murder, having been part of an alternative program due to previous charges. Throughout the hearing, Valerie's behavior was inconsistent. At times, she seemed coherent and fully aware of the situation, but at other moments, she appeared nervous, distracted, and even smiled at Shelby's family. Despite this, she answered the court's questions accurately. Although the exact content of her statements was not specified in media reports, it was noted that she never expressed remorse or apologized to Shelby's family. Shelby's parents, on the other hand, poignantly conveyed their profound loss during their victim impact statements. Shelby's father reminisced about his daughter's love for symbolic icons like peace signs and how she was still finding her way in life at the time of her murder. He reflected on Valerie's demeanor during her guilty plea, stating that her voice conveyed a lack of remorse. The grieving father asserted that by admitting to intentionally killing Shelby, Valerie seemed to take pride in her crime, which demonstrated a clear lack of regret. Toby expressed his belief that there was more to the story behind Valerie's motivation for killing Shelby than just jealousy, and he referenced the defense's argument about Valerie's mental health issues. Shelby's father pointed out that many people in prison have mental health issues, and he vowed to continue seeking answers about the tragedy. In a heartfelt reflection, Toby noted that there were two tragedies in this case. The first was the shocking and agonizing death of his daughter, and the second was Valerie's decision to throw away her future in a fit of rage. He acknowledged that Valerie's children would greatly suffer as a result. It was revealed that Valerie, who was 22 years old, had at least 2 children, although no further details about them were publicly disclosed. The grieving father said that the tragedy wouldn't stop at the graveyard or in the courtroom, because true justice couldn't be achieved in such a tragic situation. However, he said he had forgiven Valerie in order to find peace within himself, which he believed was guided by his faith in Christ. He was confident that Shelby was with God and reiterated his deep love for her. Shelby's mother, Shauna, also spoke about her feelings. She remembered her daughter as a princess from the day she was born, describing her as a kind spirit who would always help a friend, no matter the distance. Shauna vowed to attend all possible appeal hearings that Valerie's defense might initiate in the future. She shared the pain of remembering her lifeless daughter and the helplessness she felt, unable to protect her. All she could do was lay her head on Shelby's chest as her daughter lay in a medically induced coma. She publicly praised her daughter's courage, saying that Shelby had managed to name her attacker twice and fought hard for her life after being attacked. Shauna detailed the severe injuries Shelby suffered, explaining that her heart was racing at an unsustainable pace. Although Shelby's medical expenses totaled nearly $500,000, Shauna didn't seek compensation because they were waived following her death. The funeral expenses alone were around $115,000, but Shauna emphasized that she didn't expect to receive any compensation and didn't want any money from Valerie. Holding back tears, Shelby's mother poignantly expressed that memories were all she had left, and she wished she could trade places with her daughter. She noted that some days, the grief was so intense that she couldn't muster the strength to get up. After the legal representatives finished their presentations and the victim's family statements, the court awaited the judge's verdict. Under Indiana law, the sentence could range from a minimum of 45 years to a maximum of 65 years, with an average of 55 years. Valerie's defense team requested the minimum sentence, citing various mitigating factors, while the prosecution sought the maximum sentence. Before making his decision, The judge pointed out that it was clear the murder was planned in advance, and Valerie was fully aware of her actions. Her decision to flee to Ohio further supported this. While the judge acknowledged that Valerie had a difficult upbringing, marked by inadequate education, personal traumas, and mental health issues, he emphasized that she already had a growing criminal record at the time of Shelby's murder, including pending charges for a separate crime. Despite her past attempts at rehabilitation, her criminal history and lack of success in those attempts meant her traumatic past could not be used as an excuse. Taking these factors into account, the judge sentenced the 23-year-old Valerie to the maximum possible sentence of 65 years in prison. He also ordered the destruction of the weapon used in the murder. According to the American Correctional System's records, Valerie is currently incarcerated in an Indiana women's prison, with the earliest estimated release date being June 18, 2027, at which time she will be 72 years old. After the court session, Shelby's parents said they were satisfied with the verdict. However, they later made it clear that no verdict could ease their pain, especially since Valerie would be spending her days in prison. Shelby's mother emphasized that she would always miss and remember her daughter. This case is particularly notable because the victim, who was mortally wounded, was able to identify her killer. A prosecutor not involved in the case explained that when a dying victim identifies their attacker, this is known as a dying declaration. These statements provide a crucial lead for detectives and are the only exception to the hearsay rule in court trials, ensuring that the most reliable evidence is presented. The prosecutor also stressed that dying declarations are admissible in court because they tend to produce more trustworthy statements, given the immense pressure and tragic circumstances surrounding them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marcos Matsunaga. Marcos Matsunaga was a member of one of Brazil's wealthiest families and headed Yoki, their business that produced a wide range of food products. Yoki was founded by Marcos's grandfather, Yashizo Cardano, who had immigrated to Brazil. The company name Yoki was derived from the first letters of Yashizo's surname and first name. Yoki's origins date back to the mid-20th century when it started as a small flour milling operation. Despite being formed during a time of crisis and war, the business not only survived but thrived, eventually expanding into a global company with a diverse product line. Born into a wealthy family, Marcos never experienced hardship or denial. As the successor to the family business, he inherited the company built by his grandfather and father. With this foundation, Marcos had the potential to become the family's first billionaire, a goal he pursued throughout his life. However, his ambitious plans were ultimately unfulfilled. Everyone who knew Marcos personally described him as a skilled and successful businessman. He not only preserved but also significantly increased the family's wealth, generating substantial profits. However, Marcos had a difficult personality. He was demanding, arrogant, and controlling, particularly with those around him. Additionally, he struggled with his physical appearance, having been overweight since childhood, wearing glasses due to vision problems, and being short and somewhat awkward. These issues led to difficulties in his interactions with peers from an early age. Marcos had few friends, and women tended to avoid him because of his unusual demeanor. For a long time, he was unable to form lasting, meaningful relationships. Despite his wealth and business success, he couldn't sustain romantic connections beyond a couple of dates. His arrogance and ego often repelled women, leading him to seek the company of escorts and sex workers. There is very little information available about his first wife. It is known that he married out of desperation and pressure from his relatives, rather than love or passion. Despite this, the marriage lasted several years, but both spouses quickly regretted their decision. The young wife initially tried to tolerate his difficult personality, hoping they could become a happy couple over time. However, she was mistaken, and they grew further apart over the years. Marcos frequently cheated on her without attempting to hide or justify it. He typically found mistresses on websites offering intimacy for money. One such mistress was Alice, an escort with a portfolio on these platforms. Marcos noticed her, a bright and attractive blonde with a beautiful figure, and began regularly inviting her on dates, generously paying for them. Alice was 6 years younger than him and was born into a poor and dysfunctional family in a high-crime area of the city. She never knew her father, and her mother struggled with heavy drinking and was often involved with men who shared her addiction. As a result, Alice had a difficult and joyless childhood, facing repeated physical and emotional abuse from her mother's roommates at a very young age. As soon as she finished school, Alice left her troubled home life and neighborhood behind. She took nursing courses, which led to a job at a hospice. However, she soon realized that caring for terminally ill patients was not fulfilling her dreams or utilizing her full potential. As a sensitive and vulnerable young woman, Alice became deeply attached to her patients, and each death felt like a personal loss. A few years later, Alice decided to pursue higher education and change careers. She chose to study law, which she believed would offer her more opportunities and open doors in life. After preparing for admission, Alice scored well on the entrance exams. However, her modest nursing salary was not enough to cover the cost of her studies. Alice was alone with no one to turn to, having cut ties with her family after leaving home. To support herself, she decided to monetize her physical appearance and signed up on an escort services website. With the site's help, she created an attractive profile, and soon, wealthy men took notice of the young and beautiful blonde. Through her escort work, Alice earned a good income, enough to cover her education expenses and support herself. However, she intended to quit this line of work once she graduated and found a job in her field. During this time, Alice met Marcos, a regular client who showered her with gifts and openly dated her. Although Alice knew Marcos was married, she never imagined that one of the country's wealthiest men would leave his wife for her. Alice Matsunaga's story resembled a Cinderella tale. A poor girl from a disadvantaged background, working as an escort, captures the heart of a multimillionaire who falls deeply in love with her. Marcos lost his mind over Alice, but it's unclear if she deliberately tried to win him over. 6 months into their relationship, Marcos decided he wanted to be with Alice long-term, so he filed for divorce from his first wife without hesitation. He began introducing Alice as his fiancée to everyone. To avoid revealing how they really met in Alice's occupation, Marcos and Alice fabricated a story about meeting casually in a cafe. They stuck to this version, and even Marcos's closest relatives and friends didn't suspect the truth. However, Alice wasn't warmly received by Marcos's family, the Matsunagas. His parents suspected that Alice had used her charm to capture Marcos's heart, despite his unattractive appearance, and was now pretending to overlook his difficult personality. Nevertheless, when Marcos announced his plans to divorce his first wife and marry Alice, no one strongly objected. Marcos organized an extravagant traditional wedding, complete with a white dress, numerous guests, and a large, multi-tiered cake. Following the wedding, he relocated his wife to his spacious and luxurious mansion, where she took on the role of mistress. Matsunaga was renowned for his passion for collecting expensive wines and rare firearms. His home featured a vast wine cellar, where bottles were meticulously arranged by year and country of origin. Additionally, the house had a secret room dedicated to his extensive collection of firearms and edged weapons, which adorned the walls from floor to ceiling. Marcos took great pride in his collections and continually sought to expand them. However, his home was also overflowing with antiques, luxury items, and modern art pieces, which were somewhat tastelessly displayed on the walls and every available surface. After the wedding, they decided to start a family, but despite their efforts, Alice struggled to conceive for an extended period. Consequently, They opted for in vitro fertilization, but success was not immediate. When their daughter was finally born, it seemed that their happiness knew no bounds. Marcos and Alice were devoted to raising their baby girl, planning for her future, and later, exploring the world together as a family, immersing themselves in diverse cultures and traditions. Their daughter was raised with love, care, and every luxury, like a true little princess. However, Marcos and his wife, Alice, shared a unique common interest: big game hunting. In reality, hunting had always been Marcos's passion. He had previously tried to share this hobby with other women in his life, including his first wife, but they had all found it repulsive. Marcos had given up hope of finding someone who shared his enthusiasm. Many people now believe that Alice took up hunting to gain Marcos's favor and win his heart. Initially, they visited shooting ranges together, where Alice learned to handle various firearms. Later, they ventured into the woods to hunt wild animals. Alice showed no qualms about taking the lives of animals, treating it as a competition: either you succeed or you don't. Marcos admired this attitude and enjoyed watching his wife skillfully handle her weapons and track her prey. He also taught Alice how to hunt and prepare wild game such as boars and deer. They would skin and carve the animals together, using specialized tools like large knives, cleavers, and axes to separate the body parts. The family didn't have traditional pets like cats or dogs. Instead, they kept poisonous snakes in specially designed terrariums that mimicked their natural habitats. This was a dream come true for Marcos, who had always been fascinated by snakes but had been discouraged from keeping them by his first wife. Alice had won Marcos over by embracing his unconventional hobbies. By the spring of 2012, Marcos was on the verge of making the deal of a lifetime, one that would catapult him to billionaire status and take his income to new heights. He was busy negotiating with potential business partners, planning to sell the family company and invest the profits in a lucrative new venture. Marcos was rarely at home due to his complete absorption in work and the realization of his ambitious plans. He and his wife resided in an elite apartment complex in the city's business center, near the main office of his company. However, Marcos spent most of his time away, leaving his young wife alone and bored in their luxurious apartment with a panoramic city view. Marcos' work schedule was tightly packed with meetings, business discussions, and specialist consultations, often keeping him away from home overnight. Despite this, he promised his wife that once the deal was finalized, their lives would undergo a significant transformation. But on May 19, 2012, the eve of a billion-dollar deal, Marcos vanished without a trace. His wife, Alice, did not report Marcos missing until the next day. She believed he was at work, attending a scheduled meeting that could have lasted into the night and early morning. Marcos was supposed to meet a business partner and had warned Alice that he might spend the night at the office before heading straight to the meeting. However, when Marcos failed to return home and stopped answering his phone, Alice grew concerned and filed a missing persons report. Police quickly discovered that Marcos had missed both the evening and morning meetings, which was unusual for him. This led them to suspect that Marcos might have been kidnapped, and they expected a ransom demand to be made to his family within hours. Despite this, 24 hours passed, followed by another 24 hours, without any ransom demands. As time went on, hopes of finding Marcos alive began to dwindle. Meanwhile, investigators questioned Marcos's relatives, friends, and business partners to see if he had any enemies or if anyone might benefit from his disappearance or the disruption of his upcoming deal. However, they were unable to identify anyone who might have wanted Marcos dead. Marcos was a skilled businessman who made strategic decisions that generally benefited everyone. However, his personal life was marred by infidelity. His wife, Alice, discovered that he was cheating on her with a woman named Natasha. Despite his promise to end the affair after Alice threatened to divorce him, Marcos continued to see Natasha, albeit more discreetly. Alice suspected that the affair was ongoing and hired a private detective to gather evidence. The detective uncovered photographs and videos of Marcos and Natasha on romantic dates at restaurants and venues that Marcos and Alice regularly visited. It seemed that Marcos was openly flaunting his infidelity, taking his mistress to places where he was well known and where his wife might find out. As it was later revealed, Natasha Lima, a businessman, was discovered on the same escort services website where he had first met Alice. They had been together for approximately 5 months, during which time he gifted her an expensive car and paid a substantial sum of money for Natasha to delete her profile from the site. Alice presented photos and videos as evidence of her husband's infidelity to Marcos's parents. She mentioned that she had shown all this to Marcos the day before his disappearance, but instead of apologizing and asking for forgiveness, he packed his belongings, informed his wife that he was leaving her, and then departed from their apartment, vanishing without a trace. Based on Alice's account, it seemed that her husband had given in to his desires and decided to run away with his new mistress. However, those who knew Matsunaga unanimously agreed that he was too invested in the business, which his family had built over decades, to simply abandon it and disappear. The answers to many questions were uncovered about a week later when a passerby discovered scattered garbage bags containing human remains in a deserted area roughly 50 kilometers from Marcos's residence. The man immediately notified the police of his gruesome discovery. The victim was soon identified as Marcus Matsunaga, a missing person who had been searched for nationwide. According to experts, Matsunaga was shot in the head and then dismembered. His body was packed into garbage bags and dumped on the outskirts of the city. The killer's skills with a carving knife suggested they were either a surgeon or an experienced butcher. This conclusion was drawn from the precise cuts made to separate the body parts. The investigation initially lacked concrete leads, so it began by reviewing the last known location of the deceased. The elite residential complex where Matsunaga lived with his wife and daughter had multiple surveillance cameras, and their footage was carefully examined. The evening before Matsunaga went missing, he and his wife ordered food to be delivered to their home. Security footage shows Matsunaga taking the elevator to the first floor, then returning to his apartment with pizza boxes in hand. He entered the apartment and never left again, not that evening, overnight, or the next day. Despite this, his wife was seen leaving the apartment the following morning with 3 large, wheeled suitcases. The footage shows Alice struggling to move heavy suitcases, which sparked the investigators' suspicions about their contents. On the same day, she was taken into custody and questioned at the police station. Initially, she denied any wrongdoing, sticking to her story that her husband had left her for another woman. However, when shown the elevator footage, she broke down in tears and began to open up. Alice revealed that her marriage had been troubled for a long time, and her husband's behavior had become increasingly abusive. He constantly belittled her, bringing up her past work as an escort and claiming he had rescued her. He also controlled every aspect of her life, isolating her from friends and criticizing her parenting. When Alice mentioned divorce, Marcos threatened to leave her with nothing, take their daughter, and restrict her access to the child. On the evening of the incident, Alice confronted her husband with photos of him and his mistress, which only enraged him. He physically abused her, and Alice's memories of what happened next are hazy. She doesn't recall how she obtained the gun used to shoot her husband. Later, realizing what she had done, Alice attempted to cover up the crime by disposing of the body and making it seem like her husband had vanished. Alice, a former nurse familiar with human anatomy, had been taught by her husband how to dissect animal carcasses. They had the necessary tools at home, making the process of cutting up her husband's body a matter of technique. This gruesome task was carried out while their young daughter slept in the next room. However, Alice's testimony raised many doubts and questions from the start. Further investigation revealed that Alice received photos and videos of her husband's infidelity from a private detective on May 20th, after she had already killed him. She presented these to her husband's parents, claiming he had abandoned her for his mistress. A witness, Natasha Lima, testified in court that Marcos wanted a divorce but was afraid of Alice, describing her as mentally unstable and capable of terrible things. Natasha stated that the last time she saw Marcos, he complained about the constant family scandals and shared his plans to move to Florida after selling his company. He intended to start a new business and leave Alice behind, as he planned to divorce her and move on with his life. Experts made a disturbing discovery. There was blood in Marcos's lungs, indicating he was still alive and trying to breathe when his head was severed from his body. This contradicts Alice's claim that he died instantly from a bullet wound. Furthermore, the pathologist found that the bullet entered Marcos's head at an unusual angle, suggesting he was not expecting to be shot and made no attempt to defend himself. This finding contradicts Alice's account of Marcos attacking her and her need to defend herself. Most witnesses testified that Marcos, despite his difficult personality and hurtful words, never physically harmed anyone. It appears that Alice fabricated the episode, taking advantage of Marcos's inability to refute her claims. Ultimately, the court found Alice guilty of premeditated murder with extreme cruelty and attempting to cover up the crime. Alice Matsunaga received a 20-year prison sentence, a punishment many deemed too lenient for her crime. The victim's parents are now tasked with raising their granddaughter. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lizzy Marriott. In the fall of 2012, Lizzy Marriott began her studies in marine biology at the University of New Hampshire. To reduce her living expenses, she moved out of her family home in Massachusetts, where she lived with her parents, Bob and Melissa Lizzy, and relocated to Chester to live with her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky Hannah. Lizzy quickly became a beloved member of her aunt and uncle's family. She had a passion for marine animals, which led her to pursue a degree in marine biology. Although she was now 2 hours away from her parents, they remained close and kept in regular contact. Lizzy was known for her kind, gentle, and sweet nature, which made her a favorite among those who knew her. Lizzy's aunt recalled that whenever Lizzy came home, she'd exclaim, "I'm home," and it filled their hearts with joy. Lizzy was thriving in her new life, with new opportunities opening up in her free time. She had found a job at Target, where she quickly fit in and earned respect from her colleagues. That's where she met Kate McDonough, an 18-year-old who quickly became a close friend. They girls often hung out after work, and one day, Kate invited Lizzy over to her apartment. On subsequent invitations, Lizzy was happy to accept. Lizzy and Kate planned a cozy evening with dinner and a movie on October 9th. However, Kate's boyfriend Seth joined them, bringing a lively atmosphere. Seth was a man of many talents, with a theater arts background and a black belt in karate. Lizzy's family and friends expected a fun evening together. When she failed to return home at the agreed-upon time, her relatives initially thought she might have stayed overnight at a friend's place and then headed to university. However, when she didn't show up the next day, her aunt and uncle grew concerned and contacted her parents, who were also unaware of her whereabouts. Lizzy's parents immediately drove to Chester, reporting their daughter's disappearance to the police along the way. The investigation began, and the police questioned everyone who knew Lizzy, but her relatives had no idea where she had gone. Fortunately, a friend named Nate revealed that he thought Lizzy might be with Kate McDonough. Nate asked Kate if she had seen Lizzy. Kate replied that she hadn't. Detectives began investigating the new information provided by Nate. In the meantime, they discovered that her bank accounts showed no activity, and her phone was dead. This led them to rule out the initial theory that she might have been involved in an accident. Shortly after, her car was located. After interviewing her friends and co-workers, investigators gathered some information about Kate and her boyfriend, Seth. Lizzy and Kate's acquaintances have noticed they spending increasing amounts of time together, despite their vastly different personalities. Outwardly, Lizzy is sociable and compassionate, whereas Kate is known for being rude. The reason behind their close relationship remains unclear. Lizzy was once a cheerful person, but after meeting Seth, she changed. Her co-workers noticed a difference, and she distanced herself from relatives who disapproved of Seth's behavior. They started dating when Lizzy was 17 and moved in together in Dover, New Hampshire, after she turned 18. On October 12, authorities questioned Kate and Seth separately but at the same time. This tactic helped investigators gather more information. For 2 hours, Kate consistently denied ever having met Lizzy on October 9th, but then she stopped cooperating completely with the investigation. Seth, on the other hand, was more open with the details. He contradicted Kate's account, saying that Lizzy was actually at their place on the 9th. Seth described the events of that day, saying that he, Kate and Lizzy watched a movie together, played strip poker and then engaged in a consensual threesome. However, the situation becomes tragic when things don't go as planned. Lizzy accidentally dies while tied with rope. Too shocked and afraid of being misunderstood, Seth and Kate decided to dump Lizzy's body into the Piscataqua River on Pierce Island. After being questioned for 11 hours, Seth accompanied police to the location and reenacted how he and Kate threw the body off the cliff. Lizzy's parents doubted Seth's account of her death, insisting she was in a loving relationship with Brittany and wouldn't cheat or take her own life. They urged police to find her body for a proper burial. The search continued with volunteers and a detective, but strong river currents made it possible her body was swept to the Atlantic. The investigation into Lizzy's death continued with a search of Seth's apartment. Detectives found the apartment cluttered and disorganized, with evidence of Seth's interest in occultism and black magic. A search of the surrounding area turned up a bag in a trash container containing black leather gloves, a sweatshirt, and men's underwear with DNA from both Seth and Lizzy, confirming their intimate relationship. The sweatshirt was identified as Lizzy's by her family. Later, Kate McDonough confirmed some of his account. According to Kate, she, Seth, and Lizzy spent the evening of October 9th watching a movie and playing strip poker, which eventually led to a consensual intimate encounter involving rope bondage, which Lizzy had agreed to. Lizzy Marriott was having a good time until she suddenly had a seizure, suffocated, and lost consciousness. She stopped breathing when Seth and Kate lifted her up. Kate thought it was an accident, but an unexpected witness's testimony took the investigation in a new direction. A young woman visited the police station, claiming to have crucial information about the Lizzy Marriott case and requesting to speak with the lead detectives. During the conversation, she introduced herself as Catherine Fish, Seth Mella's ex-girlfriend. Her statements implied that Seth was capable of murder. She revealed that Seth had once confided in her about a fantasy in which he took someone's life. To understand Catherine's testimony, it's essential to examine her past relationship with Seth. They met 10 years ago, and initially, Seth seemed attentive and caring. However, during their first intimate encounter, Catherine discovered Seth's interest in BDSM. Seth initially seemed great, but he revealed a cruel and controlling side over time. He didn't tolerate disagreement or boundaries. After sharing dark fantasies, Kinda felt trapped and scared, especially when Seth physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and refusing to let go despite her pleas. This incident shattered her illusions about their relationship. After moving to a new city, Kinda felt isolated and alone, dependent on Seth. As his behavior escalated, he introduced other women, proposing a polyamorous relationship. Kinda felt trapped, afraid to leave due to Seth's controlling behavior. It took months for her to gather the courage to escape the toxic relationship. In May 2014, Seth Mella appeared in court, facing not only intentional murder charges but also accusations of taking advantage of multiple individuals. Several people testified against him, including Kate McDonough. 2 months after Lizzy's death, Kate was arrested and held in custody on charges of obstructing justice and interfering with the investigation. During her time in custody, Kate had ample opportunity to reflect on the events and consider who she was protecting. While imprisoned, Kate and Seth stayed in close touch and envisioned a life together in a country where they could not be extradited. They shared dreams of getting married, starting a family, and building a future, but their escape plan stalled in the winter of 2012. Seth convinced his cellmate, Ryan Bachman, who was about to be released, to help their escape. The plan was for Ryan to use his bank account to withdraw money, buy drugs, and sell them to increase their initial investment. They intended to use the money to purchase guns, 2 cars, explosives, and a boat. Ryan had different intentions and chose to keep the money for himself, causing Seth to give up on their plan to escape. Meanwhile, authorities became aware of their scheme. Seth wrote to Kate and hinted at a reunion in the afterlife, suggesting he believed in its existence. This could imply that Seth was vaguely suggesting Kate should consider ending her life to join him in the afterlife. As time passed, Kate's thoughts became clearer, allowing her to make a more rational decision when the prosecutor's office presented her with a favorable deal in 2014. Under the agreement, Kate was required to reveal the truth about the events that occurred on the evening of October 9th, and in return, her potential 20-year prison sentence was significantly reduced to 3 years. This offer was especially beneficial in light of the circumstances that later came to light during the investigation. As part of their agreement, Kate acknowledged that she was deeply intimidated by Seth and followed his instructions without hesitation. Over time, Seth had slowly stripped Kate of her autonomy and stifled her ability to make decisions for herself. Approximately 6 weeks before the tragic event, Seth had asked Kate to arrange a threesome with someone else while she was away on a 10-day theater tour, but Kate was unable to find someone to participate. Over time, Seth's messages to Kate became increasingly aggressive, transitioning from giving her instructions to making threats. He warned her of severe consequences if she didn't meet his demands, which included bringing a friend to participate in his plan. Kate invited Lizzy to visit her at home, and Lizzy agreed because she trusted Kate and had been to her place before. However, Kate didn't tell Lizzy that Seth would also be there, as she knew Lizzy might be hesitant. Seth had seen Lizzy's photos and was eager to meet her. On October 9th, Seth arrived at Kate's apartment at 9 p.m. At first, Kate and Lizzy chatted together, and Seth joined in later, initially creating a light-hearted atmosphere with his jokes and friendly demeanor. As they watched a movie, Seth suggested playing strip poker, dimming the lights to create an intimate setting. Lizzy began to lose the game, eventually ending up in her underwear. In another round, Seth suggested kissing Kate, but she refused, explaining that she was in a committed relationship and found the idea unpleasant. Seth suggested leaving Lizzy alone, but she refused. He retrieved a rope and gloves from his room, returned, and strangled her with the rope before she could react. After killing Lizzy, Seth committed a further act of violence against her body. His girlfriend, Kate, was present but did not intervene, claiming she was too scared to act. She feared that she would become the next victim if she tried to help. Later, at around 1 a.m., Seth and his girlfriend wrapped Lizzy's body in tarpaulin and placed it in a suitcase. They then transported the suitcase to Lizzy's car and drove to Pierce Island by the river. From the observation deck, they removed Lizzy's body from the suitcase and threw it off the cliff. After the incident, Kate and another person cleaned up inside her car. Then they drove to the campus parking lot, where Kate parked her vehicle. From the parking lot, they walked a 10-mile distance to Kate's home. The experience left Kate severely shaken, and she went into shock. She was also fearful of testifying against Seth in the future, worrying that he might intimidate or silence her due to concerns for her safety. During the trial, Kate's excessive sobbing raised suspicions, with some doubting her emotional display and suggesting she was a skilled actress. Kate's defense claimed that Lizzy's death was an accident during intimacy, but acknowledged that Seth and Kate had disposed of the body. They alleged that Seth isolated and coerced Kate, affecting her mental state. The prosecution focused on deliberate murder, citing the discovery of gloves at the scene, which suggested premeditation. Roberta Gherkin and Paul Hickok, acquaintances of Seth Mella, testified for the prosecution. After Lizzy's murder, Seth called them at 10:49 p.m. asking for help. When they arrived after 11 p.m., they found Seth on the bed next to Kate McDonough in lingerie. Seth said, "This time things went too far." Roberta found Kate in the kitchen and suggested calling an ambulance. They chose not to intervene or contact police, avoiding involvement. Seth Mella was convicted of first-degree murder by strangulation and conspiracy in 2014, receiving a life sentence without parole. Kate McDonough, who was 20 at the time, got a 3-year sentence as part of a plea deal and was released in 2016. She has since maintained a low profile. Lizzy Marriott's parents, Bob and Melissa, do not feel the sentence is sufficient. They hope her case can serve as a warning to others, especially women. They created a memorial bench in her hometown since her body was never recovered. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carrie Farver. Carrie Farver was born on November 30th, 1974, in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. As a single mother, she raised her son, Max Maxwell, after experiencing failed relationships in the past. Raising Max was challenging for Carrie. Despite her immense love for her child, she struggled with depression, which led to a period where she spent a month in bed. During this time, her mother, Nancy Rainey, took care of Max. Carrie's difficult relationship with Max's father and unstable living conditions contributed to her mental health issues. At the age of 20, Carrie's struggles led to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. This condition causes extreme mood swings, ranging from euphoria, increased productivity, and excessive friendliness to depression, bitterness, and feelings of powerlessness. Although bipolar disorder significantly complicates daily life, Carrie's doctor found an effective treatment for her in the early 2000s. With this treatment, Carrie was able to manage her condition and live a relatively normal life. Whether Carrie wanted to settle her personal life is an open question. On one hand, what woman doesn't dream of a suitable partner? On the other hand, why commit to someone who might bring worries and misfortunes? Carrie was raised in a loving family and had an active lifestyle. She played sports and aspired to become a doctor. However, her dreams were cut short during her first medical practice when she fainted at the sight of blood. Deciding not to risk her health or her patients, she pursued a career in programming instead. In the fall of 2012, Carrie received a job offer in Omaha with good prospects and decided to take it. However, her son Max was in middle school and preferred to stay in his familiar surroundings, so he remained with his grandmother in Macedonia. According to Amy, a friend of Carrie's father, Carrie had a radiant smile that drew attention whenever she entered a room. It was likely this quality that caught Dave Kropa's eye when they met at an auto repair shop in November 2012. As Carrie showed him something inside her car, a Ford Explorer, Dave felt an instant attraction. Their first date arrived soon after, but their time together was interrupted by numerous calls and messages from a woman named Liz, who eventually stopped by Dave's apartment to collect something she had left there earlier. Dave told Carrie about his past relationship with Liz, whom he met on a dating site 6 months prior. They had been together for a while, but he ended things because she was extremely clingy. Carrie was understanding and wasn't fazed by Liz's presence in Dave's apartment, recognizing that everyone has past relationships that can resurface. 2 weeks after moving in, Carrie started dating Dave. They had discussed their expectations beforehand and agreed to a brief, casual affair. Liz, whose full name is Shaunana Elizabeth Gollier, was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Dave and Liz had children around the same age. However, Dave felt Liz wasn't a suitable long-term partner due to her limited education and lack of shared interests. Their relationship focused more on physical intimacy than meaningful conversations. Over time, Liz grew increasingly interested in what Dave was doing when she wasn't around, particularly in regards to who he was seeing. However, Dave consistently reminded her that they were in an open relationship, implying that she shouldn't be concerned about his interactions with others. He also reassured her that she had the freedom to date other men if she chose to do so. Despite Dave's openness, Liz couldn't shake off her feelings of dissatisfaction and jealousy, particularly towards Dave's children and their mother, Amy. She struggled to understand the close bond that persisted between Dave and Amy even after their breakup. As a result, Liz's behavior became increasingly possessive, prompting Dave to create distance between them. It was during this period of separation that Carrie entered Dave's life. Carrie was not only beautiful but also stylish, intelligent, and a great conversationalist. Dave found himself lost in conversation with her for hours, feeling an undeniable connection as they shared common interests and perspectives. Liz noticed that Dave was becoming increasingly distant, so she tried to rekindle their connection by sending messages, emails, and making phone calls. However, he had no intention of stopping his interactions with Carrie or anyone else for her sake. Meanwhile, Carrie and Dave were spending more nights together, which was convenient for Carrie's work schedule and enjoyable for Dave. Carrie seemed to be taking things lightly, focusing on having fun and not looking for anything serious. In December 2015, Liz was shot and non-fatally wounded, leading her to suspect who might be responsible and realize she needed to take action. 2 years prior, on November 13, 2012, Carrie had kissed Dave goodbye before he left for work, expecting to see him later. However, that would be the last time they saw each other. At 9:45 a.m. that morning, Dave received a surprising text message from Carrie stating she wanted to move in with him permanently. Dave found this message disconcerting as they had previously discussed and agreed not to rush into a relationship, being happy with their current situation. Dave replied that he wasn't ready for such a change, but Carrie's response was unpleasant and filled with profanity. He was shocked to discover that all of Carrie's belongings were gone from the apartment. This led him to believe she had left him for good. That same day, Carrie also removed him as a friend on Facebook, which seemed like the end of the matter. However, Dave started getting multiple rude texts and emails from Carrie daily, containing curses and threats to ruin his life. Carrie sent a large number of these messages, all of which were aggressive. Uncharacteristically, she also stopped showing up for work, despite being known for her punctuality. Strange messages weren't only sent to Dave but also to her mother and 15-year-old son, Max. She claimed to have found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max with her, but wanted to be alone for the time being due to worries over her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie posted on Facebook that she'd left of her own free will and was tired of criticism. She wasn't missing her old life but wasn't ready to return home. Carrie asserted her independence as a grown woman, stating that she had the right to leave home if she chose to. She apologized for hurting everyone by leaving abruptly. However, as time passed, Carrie failed to reappear. Her mother became increasingly concerned when Carrie missed important family events, including her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other celebrations. The final indication that something was seriously wrong was when Carrie missed her father's funeral. Liz began receiving messages from Carrie, which were insulting, humiliating, and even threatening. Carrie warned Liz to stay away from Dave. Confused by Carrie's behavior, Liz reached out to Dave, who revealed he was facing a similar situation. Carrie was sending him messages and emails, accusing him of wrongdoing, calling him a liar, and vowing revenge for the pain he allegedly caused her. The messages were sometimes ominous, with Carrie claiming to know what Dave was doing at the moment. The shared experience brought Dave and Liz closer together, but also made Dave feel guiltier about the trouble he had caused. The messages from Carrie grew more menacing and were filled with grammatical errors and illogical content. This was unusual, as Carrie's mother claimed that her daughter had always been a calm person who wrote coherent and well-structured letters and documents. Carrie was known to be meticulous about spelling and writing style. It's possible that she had experienced even more severe mental health issues. Her actions seemed to be driven solely by her uncontrolled mental state. A key indicator of dissociative identity disorder, also known as split personality, is the presence of separate, simultaneous self-consciousness in each ego, each with its own distinct memories, thoughts, behaviors, and inclinations towards specific actions. This might explain Carrie's unusual behavior and altered writing style. Everything suggested she was unstable, which is why the police didn't initially consider her missing, instead focusing on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave. They tried to track Carrie's cell phone, but it was unsuccessful due to blocked signals. Meanwhile, Liz and Dave continued to receive hundreds of texts and emails, sometimes simultaneously receiving nasty messages when they were together. Dave and Liz continued dating, but he felt uneasy around her as she became increasingly demanding. Despite claiming to be fine with their no-commitment relationship, Liz's behavior suggested otherwise. Every time Dave tried to end things with Liz, Carrie would start texting him, bonding with him over their shared victimization. This common ground drew Dave and Carrie closer together, causing them to reunite repeatedly. In January 2013, a missing car was surprisingly found in Dave's front yard. However, the fingerprints on the steering wheel didn't match Carrie's, and the car showed no suspicious signs. The police eventually returned the car to Carrie's parents. Carrie continued to message Liz and Dave, escalating her behavior by sending pictures of their children and threatening to harm them unless Dave left Liz alone. As time passed, Carrie's stalking persisted, and Liz's jealousy grew, frustrating Dave. He became exhausted with the events unfolding in his life and eventually found the strength to end his relationship with Liz. This decision came shortly after a tragic incident in August 2013, when Liz reported a fire at her home that resulted in the death of all her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz suspected Carrie was responsible, citing repeated threats made via texts and emails. The incident marked a significant turning point in the case of missing person Carrie Farver, leading to Carrie's placement on a federal wanted list. Tens of thousands of messages were meticulously analyzed. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz, as they believed Dave was also in danger. Someone had vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked and thrown a brick through his window. It appeared that Carrie's anger was directed at anyone in Dave's life. Consequently, Amy Flora, Fave's ex-wife, began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. As Dave spent time with his children, he also saw Amy regularly. The police were perplexed as to why Carrie, who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks, was now stalking Dave and his ex-wife. The investigators decided to focus on Dave Coupa, as Carrie's disappearance raised many questions that needed to be answered. It was a mystery that didn't add up. Carrie Farver's family was also tirelessly searching for her, exploring every possible lead to find her. Their efforts finally paid off in the spring of 2015, when detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty took on the case. Unfortunately, they found no evidence that Carrie was still alive. One of the detectives shared their thoughts with ABC News. It's unusual for adults to suddenly leave without using any money. No one saw or heard from her, which doesn't make sense. She had a good income and a nice home. I've come to believe that I have no proof she's alive. With the help of a digital forensics expert, the detectives analyzed data from Kropa and Gore's phones from 2013. Kawa discovered that Carrie had sent over 50,000 texts and 15,000 emails to Dave in just 3 years. Whoever was impersonating Carrie became increasingly sophisticated, trying to hide their IP address and true identity. Somebody with expertise in computer programs seemed to be behind the strange occurrences. In December 2015, Liz Gard contacted the police again, this time reporting that she had been shot in the leg on her own doorstep. She claimed her attacker was Amy Flora, not Carrie. Coincidentally, Dave was missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. This new development raised suspicions that Amy might be involved in Carrie's disappearance. The investigation uncovered a lead that suggested Amy's motive. She may have been seeking revenge against women connected to Dave Krupp. Amy's relationship with Dave had been complicated, and the presence of other women in his life might have prevented them from reuniting. The police promptly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, she had a solid alibi. Multiple witnesses confirmed that she was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, so no arrest was made. The investigation became increasingly puzzling. New details emerged from the analysis of Liz's cell phone data. Investigators found fake email addresses using variations of Farver's name and an app used to schedule messages. This discovery shed light on how Liz and Dave received simultaneous messages from Carrie. The investigation led to suspicion of Liz Gollier, which intensified when her fingerprint matched those on Carrie's car steering wheel. It was now clear who the culprit was, and the priority was to prevent further harm. To catch Liz off guard, detectives devised a plan to create a fake narrative, pretending to still consider Amy the prime suspect, aiming to prevent Liz from escaping or destroying evidence. Liz fell for the trap. She was thrilled at the opportunity to eliminate another rival who was threatening her relationship with Dave. Soon after, Liz Gollier gave the police an email supposedly written by Amy. The email included a confession to kidnapping Carrie, along with specific details about the crime. According to the confession, Carrie had been stabbed in the stomach or chest area before her body was disposed of. The email also revealed information about Carrie's car and home that had not been publicly disclosed. According to an investigative spokeswoman, Liz provided detectives with information that only someone intimately involved in the crime could have known. In doing so, she inadvertently implicated herself in Carrie Farver's murder. The letter made it clear that the crime occurred in a car, prompting authorities to re-examine the victim's vehicle. Upon removing the seat covers and fabric, specialists discovered a blood stain belonging to Carrie Farver. Liz managed to send messages posing as Carrie without arousing suspicion, but it's unclear how. Reports suggest that Liz Gollier led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. Notably, Garrett's IP address was linked to messages sent under Carrie's name. When questioned, Garrett revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with Liz. Out of kindness, Garrett invited Liz to move in with him and his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and deteriorated significantly once they started living together. Garrett would often take care of Liz's children while she isolated herself in her room or left the house. Garrett was shocked by what the police told him. It was discovered that Liz spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be a missing woman. Although her room was messy, no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did discover several cell phones and electronic devices in the last place she stayed. In late December 2016, Shaunana Liz was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutor commented on the complexity of the investigation, stating that most murders are dark, but this crime was particularly bizarre. It would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. Liz's actions, including letting her dog die in a fire she set herself and shooting herself in the thigh, were attempts to deflect suspicion from herself. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, believed the case against her was weak since it was largely based on circumstantial evidence. key pieces of evidence were missing, including Carrie's body and the crime weapon, and Liz had not confessed to the crime. In fact, there was no conclusive proof that Carrie was even dead. The defense team requested a mistrial, which would allow a judge to determine the extent of Shanana's guilt. The prosecution presented a substantial amount of complex electronic evidence, as well as physical evidence. They argued that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car supported the theory that she had been stabbed. Investigators also found a direct link between Shanana and Carrie's murder by analyzing a memory card that Shanana had used around the time Carrie went missing. The memory card, which was found in a tablet stored at Dave's residence, contained deleted images. It was clear that the foot belonged to a people who had been deceased for several years. Notably, Carrie had a similar tattoo among her distinguishing features. Her mother later confirmed that the tattoo indeed belonged to Carrie. The photo solidified the conviction of Shanana Liz was predator. The judge ruled her guilty of first-degree murder and handed down a life sentence without parole, stating that Carrie Farver did not disappear by choice but was tragically murdered. Authorities suspect that Shanana murdered Carrie, allowed her body to decompose, and then burned the remains to eliminate all evidence. Motivated by jealousy, she decided to eliminate her rival. After disposing of Carrie, Shanana took her cell phone and used it to send messages that would make Farver appear unstable and win back Dave's favor. When this plan succeeded, Shanana wanted to eliminate Amy as well, but she became too entangled in her own scheme and ultimately fell into her own trap. Shanana, also known as Liz, was also found guilty of arson for setting fire to her own home in August 2013 and attempting to blame it on Carrie. The fire destroyed the house and killed pets, resulting in an additional 20-year prison sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women, despite maintaining her innocence. Dave revealed that he received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he claimed that he never noticed Carrie stalking him during their relationship, which contrasts with his experience with Shanana. So, what happened to Carrie's son, Maxwell Farver? According to his LinkedIn profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps and became a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science, and is now married. Although it's unlikely he's forgotten the past, he may have found some peace with his new family. As for Dave Kropa, he now lives a private life, away from the public eye. He doesn't have a public account on any social media platform. This disturbing crime story is a harsh reminder of the complexities and manipulation that can occur in human relationships. It highlights how vulnerable we can be in our own surroundings, unaware of the true nature of those around us. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Roxanna Valdez. Roxanna Valdez was born in 1957 in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile. Roxanna married a man whose name is not publicly known, and they had a son together. However, the marriage was not successful, and they separated in 2011. As a single mother, Roxanna faced significant challenges in her small village, where job opportunities were limited. The community's main occupation was farming and selling produce, and the local schools focused on teaching agricultural skills. Roxanna worked at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. Her role was a night supervisor, responsible for ensuring the students' behavior and slept at night. She did not have a direct role in raising the children. Roxanna's son attended the same boarding school, as she was unable to care for him during the day due to her work in the fields. At the boarding school where Roxanna worked, Claudio Munoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His nighttime work schedule led to him meeting Roxanna. Despite their 14-year age difference, they discovered they had a lot to talk about. Roxanna would often spend entire nights discussing school issues and her failed marriage with Claudio. They also shared commonalities in their personal lives. Claudio had 2 daughters he loved, but he felt disconnected from their mother and had considered divorce multiple times. However, he stayed in the marriage because of a promise he made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemed to forget his promise and began spending more time with Roxanna, away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move without explaining himself to his wife. He packed his belongings and left their home to be with Roxanna, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship moved forward quickly, but Roxanna overlooked some important red flags. She welcomed the man she barely knew into her home, despite having children who needed her attention. As they had enjoyable conversations, Roxanna failed to notice that Claudio had a temper and could be cruel. The first major incident occurred at the boarding school, where Claudio was in charge of cleanliness. During a scheduled cleanup day, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio. He threatened to beat anyone who didn't help, despite having no teaching experience. Although it's unclear if he would have followed through on this threat, the students eventually started cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, unhappy with Claudio, asked him to resign voluntarily. This was a significant setback, as the Don Gregorio boarding school was one of the few places in the area that offered stable and decent-paying jobs. After searching for work in fields and at fruit bases, Claudio realized it was a futile effort. He and Roxanna decided to look for a better life elsewhere, but they left their son at the boarding school so he could continue his education. They didn't want to take any risks by bringing him along. To avoid relying on employers, who had already let them down, Claudio and Roxanna decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to Molina, a commune a couple of hours from the Chilean capital, known for its vineyards and wine exports. Roxanna and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and started their small family business. Claudio took care of purchasing and transporting products, while Roxanna handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as it would add to their expenses, and they worried that someone else might not take care of the perishable goods properly. Claudio became visibly upset and angry when he discovered Roxanna was pregnant with their first child. This was a moment that required serious thought, but Roxanna, caught up in their new relationship and thriving business, agreed with Claudio's suggestion to give the baby to her relatives to raise after birth. However, Roxanna suffered a miscarriage afterwards. Following this, Claudio's behavior changed significantly. He frequently yelled at Roxanna and occasionally turned violent. Neighbors, tired of the constant noise, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene in their domestic disputes. One time, when the Carabineros responded to a call, they found Roxanna in tears and partially undressed, fleeing the house with Claudio chasing after her. Roxanna revealed to the officers that she was suffering from ongoing domestic abuse, which had caused her miscarriage. The incident left her needing psychological support. However, as time went by, they seemed to put their issues behind them and continued living together as if nothing had happened. After the incident, Claudio should have faced charges, but Roxanna chose to forgive him and give him another chance. She made him promise that it wouldn't happen again. Although Claudio promised to change, his past behavior with his ex-wife suggested that his words might not be reliable. Sadly, the past repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxanna, but he started going out to local bars at night, drinking heavily and spending a lot of their family's money on alcohol and encounters with women. Roxanna put up with her husband's behavior, hoping that he would settle down once they had a child. In a way, she was correct. After Roxanna gave birth to a healthy child in 2013, Claudio changed his ways. He stopped going out and focused on their business, which was growing and needed more attention. They expanded their business by buying another kiosk and vehicle for transporting products. Roxanna also invested in firearms for protection, as they lived and worked in areas that weren't very safe. The family's assets appeared to increase substantially, but this growth was only theoretical. In reality, Claudio resumed his previous habits, wasting money on alcohol and reverting to violent behavior towards Roxanna. Roxanna's account detailed how the abuse in their relationship escalated. At first, Claudio drank sporadically, but the frequency soon increased. When inebriated, he would return home, accuse Roxanna of fictional affairs, and subject her to physical and sexual abuse. His actions seemed intentionally hurtful, even when Roxanna was pregnant. This culminated in a miscarriage in August 2012, sending Roxanna into a prolonged depression. On one occasion, following his typical routine, Claudio went to a local bar and didn't come back until the next morning. Roxanna, accustomed to his behavior, still felt anxious about him. It was later discovered that Claudio had taken 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, which Roxanna had obtained from selling her mother's house. He spent this money on alcohol and visits to brothels. Roxanna was shocked and felt betrayed when she discovered that Claudio had taken the money meant for their shared business, which was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio came home late that evening, Roxanna confronted him about the missing money. However, Claudio was uninterested in discussing the issue and instead hit Roxanna, admitting that he had squandered all the money. This incident was the final straw for Roxanna. Without saying a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver that was meant for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. Claudio died instantly. Roxanna was surprised by her own drastic action and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from the .38 caliber revolver was fatal. In her testimony, Roxanna expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that when she retrieved the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. Roxanna remembered the numerous times Claudio abused and assaulted her, and how she failed to report him to the authorities due to fear. She was afraid of being alone, especially after they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxanna's main concern was how it would affect their daughter if she were imprisoned and the child was sent to an institution. That night, Roxanna decided to get rid of the body and report Claudio missing. She knew the police were aware of his frequent disappearances during drinking binges. As a delicate woman, disposing of the body was a daunting task. She decided to remove it piece by piece, using kitchen knives to cut the limbs and head. The process required 5 knives, as they kept becoming dull. Roxanna then boiled the dismembered parts in large pots, all while playing with her young daughter, who was unaware of what her mother was doing and what had happened to her father. Roxanna's calculated approach to disposing of the body, while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her daughter, shows the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxanna packed them into separate plastic containers labeled by body part, hands, legs, head, and torso, and then placed each container into a garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she cleaned her house thoroughly with bleach. However, upon arriving in St. Lucia, Roxanna couldn't bring herself to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. Roxanna was nervous during the drive, constantly feeling like she was being watched and fearing that the police would stop and search her car. This fear escalated into panic, prompting her to devise a backup plan involving her daughter, where she would pretend to rush her to the hospital if stopped by police. She even considered pinching her daughter to make her cry louder and make the situation more believable. Since Roxanna couldn't discard the remains, she returned home and hid the bags in the garage. She then cleaned the interior of her car with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives. She told the police that Claudio had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days, but they simply shrugged off her claims. Roxanna visited her mother and brother, who were alarmed by her condition. She wasn't eating, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions. The only question she answered clearly was about Claudio's absence, claiming he was delayed due to a flat tire while buying goods for their store. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxanna broke down and asked her brother for help. When he arrived, she revealed everything and showed him the containers. Her brother was shocked. Roxanna wanted to unburden herself and share the traumatic experiences she had with Claudio, but she primarily needed her brother's help to dispose of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing he would be implicated as an accomplice and face police involvement. He urged Roxanna to confess to the Chilean police, the Carabineros, and threatened to do it himself if she didn't. Disappointed but with no alternative, Roxanna decided to cooperate. That night, she went to the 4th police station to make a significant statement. The officers, who knew her, initially assumed she was there to report her problematic husband. However, they were stunned by what she revealed. Roxanna was arrested on the spot. News of her arrest spread quickly, drawing numerous journalists to the station. As the journalists waited, Roxanna was eventually brought out, visibly distressed and in handcuffs. Before being escorted into a police car, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day." At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. Roxanna had confessed, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. Nevertheless, prosecutor Monica Bisos was skeptical of Roxanna's easy confession and wanted a more thorough investigation. Prosecutor Bisos asked to extend Roxanna's arrest to allow for further forensic examination. The goal was to determine if Claudio was still alive when his body was dismembered, which would have led to a longer sentence for Roxanna. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention to continue the investigation. At the same time, Roxanna's lawyer, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxanna committed the crime under extreme emotional distress. This could have been made worse by postpartum depression and the domestic abuse she suffered. Gutierrez highlighted Roxanna's cooperation with the authorities and her voluntary confession as reasons for a more lenient sentence. However, forensic results later showed that Claudio died from a gunshot wound to the chest, disproving the prosecution's theory that he was alive during dismemberment. As a result, the factors that would have increased Roxanna's sentence were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, pointed out that the gun used in the murder was registered. He also noted that Roxanna first reported domestic violence to the police just 20 days after they moved in together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela conducted a medical examination and presented documents to the court showing that Roxanna was severely mentally unstable when the crime occurred. This instability, linked to the loss of 2 children, meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions. Additionally, forensic results revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level at the time of his death on April 17, 2015. Roxanna's trial began after a year of investigations and evidence gathering. During the trial, Roxanna refused to make statements due to her distress over the media portrayal. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of the crime, but couldn't prove premeditation. The defense argued that Roxanna acted in self-defense against a man who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing in Chile lasted several weeks, captivating the entire nation. Prosecutor Monica sought a 15-year prison term for Roxanna, the accused. After considering the defense and the jury's input, the judges sentenced Roxanna to 6 years in a correctional facility with a relatively lenient regime. Claudio's family, who had hoped for a life sentence or even the death penalty for Roxanna, were outraged by the court's decision. They had already been upset when the prosecutor requested a 15-year sentence, which they felt was too lenient. The family attempted to downplay any history of domestic violence and claimed that Claudio, a financially independent businessman, would not have stolen $6,000 from Roxanna. Additionally, they alleged that Claudio had confided in them about Roxanna's threatening behavior, stating that she would often retrieve a revolver from the closet and threaten to kill him. In a press interview, Claudio's sister shifted the blame to the Chilean state, arguing that the country's judicial system is corrupt and fails to deliver justice, as evidenced by the relatively short sentence given to Roxanna, which she compared to punishments for minor thefts. Giselle, Claudio's first wife, spoke out in his defense. She stated that Claudio was never violent during their many years together. In contrast, Roxanna frequently started arguments due to her jealousy and possessiveness. Roxanna was initially imprisoned, but after serving 2/3 of her sentence, she was transferred to a semi-open education center in Tala for good behavior. She was allowed to stay in contact with her daughter and was eventually released early. The media reignited public interest in the case, and many people were outraged by her early release. However, some individuals, despite viewing Roxanna as a murderer, believed her actions were justified because they saw her as a victim. The debate surrounding this case continues to this day. This story emphasizes the severe consequences that can occur when domestic violence is not addressed promptly,